Going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We did have a closed session earlier, and I would like to report a vote of 5-0 in favor of accepting the separation agreement.
May I have the first? And then who made
Oh,
the
I made the motion, Thane seconded.
Thank you.
All of them. There are no emergency modifications.
There are none?
I'd like a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. Approval of the minutes from October 17th and the special meeting of October 17th. We opened and closed. Boy, we had 3 meetings that night.
There was a typographical error, so you do have the change on the table tonight.
I'll move to approve.
We'll have Shelley as the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
I abstain.
none opposed. We have a new student representative tonight, Sadie Broida.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Are you part of the leadership class?
I
Is that
am.
how you're here tonight?
Yes, my second year in leadership.
Oh, wonderful.
Mhm.
Well,
Great job
welcome.
in volleyball too, by the way.
Thank you very much.
I love, that's like become my favorite spectator sport.
It's very entertaining to watch.
Really good.
You guys are still in the playoffs, yes?
We actually ended this last Saturday, but we made it to quarterfinals, which is pretty good for the season. So yeah, we were very happy and satisfied.
Good.
Mhm.
Good, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, so if you would like to share what's,
Okay. At Nordhoff, we just finished up our homecoming week festivities. It was a successful week of dress-up days, noon activities, a rally, halftime show, and a dance. We had 400 students at the dance on Saturday night, which is a record. We are now in the midst of our annual fall food drive. We are asking students to help bring in cans to be donated to the local community assistance program run through Help of Ojai. Leadership will box up the food to be given away to families for Thanksgiving holiday. At Matilaha, our peer tutoring program has started. This year, we have over 40 students volunteers to do tutoring. This has given us the opportunity to do one-on-one tutoring, which so far is working great. At Summit students in grades 4 to 6 are taking a tour of the Western Foundation of Vertebrate Zoology led by biologists and scientists in Camarillo on November 9th. They have been studying birds with information from the internet, making replicas of nests, reporting to classmates on individual birds, and watching birds through binoculars once per week. The tour of the Bird Museum is a accumulation of this study. At Topa Topa had a fantastic fall festival in October. There was a huge turnout of families, and they played games and enjoyed tasty food. Students also wore costumes to the event. Another happy occasion at Topa was on October 23rd with the grand opening of the cafeteria. There was a ribbon cutting ceremony, balloons, and even cake to celebrate. Both staff and students are thrilled to have the brand new kitchen up and running. At Miners Oaks, many wonderful things are happening, but we would especially like you to know how we are progressing with our green school efforts. Miners Oaks is working towards completing the California Green Ribbon Schools application, which is due December 6th. This school year has been exciting and motivating. Student leadership has expanded and includes 40 6th through 7th graders. The students lead and accomplish goals in the environmental literacy and sustainability. Volunteering to improve our daily trash sort, the students teach how to sort all snacks and lunch items. This knowledgeable and understanding increases in environmental weekly activities, STEAM, EEI projects, and garden club. With weekly meadow walks, our living laboratory continues to increase our native plant and animal study. Our schoolyard habitat gardens are receiving student care, and we are having a January planting date to add to them. They are throughout the school and have themes which include Shumash, monarch, butterfly, and native plant gardens. The leadership team is in progress of painting and labeling the plants with wooden signs. Our sustainability practice has included a high participation in the natural walk or ride to school day on October 4th. Student leadership advertised and gave out green good tickets for prizes. We have reduced our traffic congestion with this effort. In health and fitness, we purchased new soccer nets and will plan a tournament with the upper grades. We are also adding pickleball and spikeball to our PE classes. Finally, we have taken inventory of the classroom emergency tubs and will ask for donations to restock them. It is rewarding to see a culture form and continue at our school which involves an environmental focus, health, and fitness. At Miramonte, we are overwhelmed with the number of students who wore orange to school on Unity Day, Wednesday, October 25th. Leadership students wrote positive messages about inclusion on their orange t-shirts and poster contests took place. Teachers spent more time than usual having conversations with their students about kindness, acceptance, and inclusion. Students were given rubber bracelets with positive messages. We are continuing to update our text messaging system, Remind. Our fall festival has been changed to a winter festival. It will take place during the day on Saturday, December 9th. Saturday school will also take place on that day. The grant submitted by the Miramonte PTO to Ojai Women's Fund to help fund the benches and landscape in front of Miramonte School was partially funded. The PTO requested $7,380 and we received $4,000. Adjustments will be made to those plans. The turf removal grant from Casitas Water was fully funded. The district will be reimbursed $6,200 for expenses on this project to date. New intervention programs for grades 4 to 6 using Linda Mood Bell reading and math curriculum will begin at the end of the trimester. A primary grade reading group began 3 weeks ago using this curriculum. The Miramonte dance class for this current session are full. Next session, we will be adding teachers and inviting in grades 7th and 8th. Thanks to the PTO, a sprung dance floor was installed in the dance studio on campus. There was enough floor material left to also install a spring flooring on top of the stage in the multipurpose room. A place to grow. The children at A Place to Grow had a wonderful time at the annual fall festival. They also enjoyed trick-or-treating around the district campus. Plans are in the works for our Thanksgiving feast. The preschool is full at this time with a few families on the waiting list. The second year of the QRIS rating process has begun and will end in the spring when we will learn how we did. State licensing came for the annual visit and we had no deficiencies. Lastly, at San Antonio, Miss McAlpine's first and second grade class participated in the special tactile day with parent helpers. Students experimented with gel, shaving cream, and oblak while adding food coloring and observing the changes in color and texture. Students also made Play-Doh and 3 different types of slime to extend their tactile experiments. Miss Spiva's 5th and 6th grade class had a field trip to the Ojai Cemetery October 30th, where students were able to connect with the local history of our community while exploring cultural norms and traditions. Miss Spiva's class is also participating in the National Novel Writing Month, where all students will complete a novel before winter break. That's it.
And that was long, and I know, Catalina wasn't even mentioned. I know a big group, so there's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to mention the Bird Museum is fabulous,
Have
one of
you
my
been there?
favorites. Yeah, Mr. Lapine used to take his 6th graders, and
It's, because we're now a Title I school, the bus is already funded, so it's really, there are advantages.
it's wonderful.
So, they're excited to go.
And Miners Oaks has a food fest next week or something, right?
The street eats.
Street Eats, but there's
That's
special, there's
Wednesday.
also arts and crafts this time, right? A little different?
Yes, we're adding
So.
that in.
If you want to go next week, get your plug in here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
Have you questions or comments?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you for
welcome.
coming.
Of
We
course.
hope
hope we see you again.
Yeah.
We know you have homework, so.
Yes, I do, but I can get through that. Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
good job.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comments?
No.
Not yet, okay. We are actually not having, the Nordoff drama coming this evening, maybe another time. So we will move on to 7.1.1. Public hearing on the board's appointee to the Personnel Commission. We did discuss this at the last meeting, but I would like to have a motion to open a public hearing.
Move to open a public hearing.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Would anyone like to speak on our Personnel Commission appointment? Okay, well, now we can have a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Does any member of the board need to hear anything from Andy about this, or are we ready for the vote?
You know, I'm just grateful that somebody's willing to give us their time in the very esoteric area of the district. So if Andy says it's working, I'm good with that.
Okay, so a motion to approve Karen Phipps, is it? As the OUSD Personnel Commissioner.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Okay, 7.3.1, local indicators on the California School Dashboard. Welcome, Marilyn.
Hello.
Happy to see you back.
Yes, yes. I've been a little busy up the hill,
Yes.
but I told someone the other day, I have the best job in the district. I mean, I have happy noise in the morning, because I go up there in the morning, and then I come back down here about 1, and then I get to interact with adults in the afternoon, so it's just perfect. It's just absolutely perfect. So, I'm really enjoying it. The dashboard, and I'll let Cheryl get it up.
I think we might want to turn.
Yeah. The dashboard is really the state's new accountability system. And if you remember, some years back, we had just one number, the API, and that's the number on which success and student achievement was based, one number. Now, the dashboard, it's not just a single number, but it's part of that shift in accountability in California. So now we have indicators, and there are 6 state indicators. So if you'll look on the dashboard, the 6 indicators that, go back down to chronic absentee. Those 6 indicators, starting with chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, English learner progress, grad rate, college and career, and then the 2 CASP tests, those are all automatically filled by CalPADS, which is our student information system. So those are automatically filled. Now, when you look at that dashboard, that particular dashboard, it's not current. So even though it says spring 2017, those numbers, for example, on the CASP test, the English learner, and the our English ELA and mathematics, those aren't current. Those were from the year before. So they will be current maybe November. Because it's so new, they have trouble keeping up. So those test scores will be on the dashboard maybe end of November, early.
I think the week of Thanksgiving break for us was when they were predicting
Yeah.
to have them out, or the week after.
Yes. So, but it does provide information about how districts are doing, and you can even filter it further and how schools are doing in those 6 indicators. In addition to the 6 indicators, there is also something on the dashboard called local indicators, and the local indicators are reports, pretty easy to use reports, but it's where state data is not available. And so it's up to each LEA to determine, did you meet that indicator or not meet? So really there are 3 ratings. It's met, not met, or not met for 3 or more years. So it's really hard to see, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can we zoom in a little bit? just to increase the,
See, this is on the internet, so.
I love your explanation of it. Based on my experience, it doesn't matter if you can see it anymore.
Oh, Thane, you add a lot of humor to the evening. I really appreciate that. Oh, goodness. Did we make it a little bigger?
yeah.
I've seen it.
Okay.
I know I'm gonna have to look at it again, 'cause I think that was
The
last-
local indicators, there are 4 of them, and the first one is basics. So, basic services. Did we meet basic services? And basically, that's Williams. Did students have enough textbooks? Were facilities in good repair? And are teachers qualified? And we met all of those. So you can see, we had 0 misassignments. We had.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
'Cause in our materials this meeting, there's a reference to, Williams, almost like an investigation that the Ventura County superintendent is required to do of the 54 schools that are in that 1-2 category. So beyond that, just the generic Williams, who does that assessment to make sure that we're meeting all our goals?
At each site, we make sure that we have textbooks or instructional materials. It could be online.
Right.
Instructional materials for every student. And occasionally VCOE will come out and do an audit.
Right.
And so the last couple of years, Miners Oaks has had an audit.
And that's because of Miners Oaks' specific status, right?
Because they're in the,
Because in
lowest
2012 or whatever they
quartile.
were.
Exactly.
Well, I asked them about that, and they said, oh, it's just random.
Well, no, for you guys it is because you're in the 1, 2, or 3 decile.
the
No,
decile.
but they specifically said, the woman with whom I spoke, she said it's not supposed to be every year, it's just, we're chosen randomly. And I thought, I don't think that's really the case since it happens every year. I listened to Dawn and shared
Oh,
her
yeah.
experiences on that, but anyways, it's easy enough to do because, Marilyn, does an excellent job of making sure all the, elementary principals have exactly what they need, all the textbooks. It's really well vetted, so, I think we have what we need, it's good.
But basically, you're entering that we have.
That's right. So Cheryl and I sat down over 2 or 3 days and went through the 4 local indicators. And I gave you copies of the self-reflection tools that the state says you can use those tools to see if you've met, not met. And so we sat down over the course of a couple of days. And of course, we had to email Jody. Is everyone highly qualified? Are there any misassignments, et cetera, et cetera? So, and then we used, for the 3rd part of that, facilities in good repair, we used the SARC, the School Accountability Report Card. And there's a section of the SARC that talks about in good repair or not.
Which comes from the FIT assessment.
That's right.
The facilities.
Yes,
Oh boy, what's the I stand for?
okay,
FIT, facilities inspection tool.
yeah,
And we do that across the entire district. Russ Bennett and his team and Dave Rogers, I believe, helped as well this year. In the past, Josh Brown and I have overseen that. And then the county again comes out specifically and reviews with the work that we've done for some of the schools. And recently it's been Myers Oaks each year they're out reviewing as well. So again, self-identified local information.
so we deemed ourselves to have met, and then we wrote something about, there was something that we didn't meet on the SARC, and it was one of the, a roof at Topa Topa that's repaired this year. So we deemed it to be acceptable, that we had met that, even though on last year's SARC, it was not in good repair.
Right.
The second indicator is implementation of state standards, state academic standards. And on that one, you can give a summary, or you can use the self-reflection tool. And Cheryl and I opted to use the self-reflection tool. And it was a tool that you could indicate, it was on a Likert scale. So you could indicate your simply exploring this. As a 1, your beginning development is a 2, 3, initial implementation, 4, full implementation, and then 5 was full implementation and sustainability. So you can see how we deemed each area. ELA, for example, was full implementation. Can you see it? I know it's in blue. ELD was also full implementation because, as you know, we bought new ELA, ELD textbooks this year. Mathematics, we've had new mathematics curriculum. We're in the 3rd year, so that was full implementation and sustainability. And NGSS.
When does it kick from full implementation into the next one?
It was just our
When
we
think so?
deemed it that, the first year is kind of learning about it. The second year, you're pretty good. By the 3rd year, it's pretty ingrained. So
Okay.
we figured sustainable.
That's sort of our local standard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And in next generation science standards, for example, some high school classes have NGSS implemented in them. So we deemed that to be initial implementation. Because as you may, I don't know if we talked about Nancy Hay, Natalie Hay.
I believe they're
So we're doing some NGSS in the elementary schools, but just in 6th grade. So we're initially implementing NGSS.
So that's a 3?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes. And then history, social science, that's one where it's just exploration and research phase. That's one where the framework has not even been printed yet and finalized by SBE. Okay, then there's another category.
Can I ask about the next
Sure.
generation science? Is that a general expectation that we would be offering some form of science throughout our curriculum in the elementary schools? I mean, I recognize we're resource strained, but in an ideal world, is that what the expectation would be?
Yes, and I hesitate to use the word curriculum because it's really, NGSS is really more of a method of teaching. It's not a boxed curriculum where you might think of as in math or ELA. So it's really more of a methodology, exploration, that kind of thing.
Kind of a hands-on sort of
Mhm.
environment, like.
Anybody want to add?
Lots of inquiry.
Right, and initially observing phenomena
Yeah,
and then making
observation.
predictions based on that phenomena, and then doing some reading and some information gathering, and the teacher doing a little bit of an explanation, and going back and testing your hypothesis based on what you first saw and then what you learned. So just a little bit of a difference in the way the way students interact. So. And how they-
So does this still happen? I mean, when my kids were in elementary, there was sort of, certain things. I remember, 2nd grade, I remember 4th grade, in terms of like 4th grade, they were studying earthquakes and rock and geology, and then 5th grade, it's not like that anymore.
Mm-mm. Very integrated now, much like the mathematics. So, in fact, when 6th grade and 7th grade met with the science specialists from VCOE, they decided they met 2 times during the year last year and decided at the end of that time to have an integrated model, which is just like the mathematics integrated, a little bit of physical science, a little bit of biology, that kind of thing, integrated into one. So you might have a science 1, science 2, something like that.
And how would it be different in 5th grade? Because isn't there a 5th grade science? Is there still a test for 5th grade science?
That's yet to be decided. And, we're having our field test this year, this spring. That test won't be fully operational until spring of 2019. 5th, 8th, and high school, but I don't know what grade.
11.
Yeah, 11th at the moment.
Yeah.
They're testing their
Yeah.
seniors this year.
Right.
Just gonna spread the word.
And the history and social science is a 1, we're just getting started with that?
Yeah, the framework hasn't been approved by SBE, and usually when the framework is approved, it takes between 18 and 36 months for the publishers to get on board.
So what are we doing?
A lot of collaboration within the schools. I know for Matilda, the social studies department has already asked, and they've already taken several days to collaborate to actually come up with a plan for the rest of the year. They've attended some workshops at VCOE, and based on what they've learned there, they bring it, they come together, we provide them a day or two where they can come together and actually work out a plan for that trimester, for example. So,
So it's not, but it's still the sort of world history, then US history, and then elementary is sort of California history,
US,
fourth
yeah,
grade.
California, yeah, and then
What
US,
they've had
Ancient,
before.
and then ancient.
Especially in elementary, we're relying on a lot of supplemental materials. We're using things like Scholastic News and Time Magazine, as well as EEI curriculum, which is online curriculum that covers some social studies and science content. So teachers are left really to gather and try to arrange pieces throughout the year. from what they
well,
can
and
get.
all that nonfiction they're supposed to be doing for Common Core, right?
Right, and just so you
Yeah.
know, the new language arts adoption does have science content and social studies content built into it. So there are pieces in the language arts curriculum now, which is nice.
Are we asking the elementary teachers to meet some particular objective guideline in terms of time spent on discrete areas like science? We saying, you know, X hours per week or anything like that?
No, and less so than ever before, because the expectation with Common Core is that it's actually integrated, that you're working on language arts standards as you're reading those informational texts, as you're looking at science and as you're looking at social studies. So even less so than before, there really isn't a necessary time stamp on how much time they should be spending on it.
Do we know that the language art curriculum in fact does always include the science and these other areas? Is that just a necessary fact, or is that something we have to focus on to make sure it happens? In other words, when you're reading nonfiction, there are obviously different kinds of nonfiction. Is it just a fact that the materials are science and or oriented
At
towards?
least for elementary, there's actual units within the language arts components that are completely science in nature.
So
You
they,
can actually see it when you look at the units. Like
So-
there'll be a unit on rocks in the language arts book. So they would spend like, I don't know, a week or two on that unit.
Which
So
is
the-
actually
yeah.
better,
Yeah,
because
It's
in the past
embedded.
you would be like, when am I gonna get science in?
Yes.
absolutely.
And now
Yes.
you're doing it
Freedom.
during your language arts.
Yeah, you have more time.
But the downside is we don't have curriculum for some of these subjects. And we're doing our best.
We're using a lot of supplemental materials.
But
It's,
this is all a fallout from the change like 3 years ago.
exactly.
And it's just phasing back in. That's really a terrible position to put us in. That's my comment.
Well, and even for that, now they're looking back and said, oh, what we should have done with math was, right, begin it in first grade, the next year it's first and second grade, the next year first, second, third. Instead, they're just like, everybody start it now, and
Right.
it's sort of like,
Well, you
Well, I
would
was gonna
think,
say with the math, we struggled. The first year was just a nightmare. I mean, my kid, Jazz, my oldest kid, was the first, she was seventh grader when we implemented it. I remember she just struggled completely with a whole new idea of thinking, and the book was different, and there's more reading. But Vanessa, my middle child, did not struggle nearly as much, because we had already been, implementing that thought of Common Core. So, yeah, we're gonna struggle. The first year is gonna be a struggle. I think it's gonna get easier, and as we go along, I mean, to be obvious to that.
no, I
Can
remember
we-
when you were copying things out of other
Yeah.
books and putting together.
Yeah.
And
Don't say that
Marilyn,
out
can-
loud, 'cause the public-
can we as a,
Keep it down.
I'll take the heat.
can we as a district make a choice to, like, if something were to come down the pipe, that we're gonna do it differently? We're not gonna just throw it on all the grades? We're gonna try to build
Well, the
up?
problem, the adoption is really only for 6 years, so you'd be ready for a new adoption.
Well, in addition to that, with the new set of state standards, you have to remember that the students are gonna be tested in the new way, which I'm gonna talk a little bit about later, but it would be a disservice to not give all students the new curriculum and the new methodology and then expect them to do well on the standardized tests in the spring because it's the new test. So it makes it hard for us to make those kind of decisions, like slowly rolling something out when we know they have this state test that they have to take.
I just think it would have been really nice if the state thought this through.
Such a novel concept thing.
They should have rolled it out, right? Yeah.
Priority 2, I think, is where we were headed, right?
Yeah. At any rate, so Cheryl and I sat down again with number 2, which is that instructional materials are aligned. So I don't need to go through each one because I think I sent it to you all. And some are full implementation, some are just beginning, like the next generation science standards beginning development. Let's go on to 3, Cheryl, because that's the
Parent engagement.
frameworks, yeah. Or, yeah, parent engagement. The third indicator is parent engagement, and that's one that the option was to survey parents, and it fits right into the LCAP. But the dashboard fits a lot of ways into the LCAP, but because there's also, we have a goal in the LCAP on parent engagement. So we're going to send a survey to parents in bands, so high school, junior high, and then elementary. And then hopefully we'll get good feedback and input from parents, and then we can report that, what we find in that survey.
Do you know how you're gonna do the survey?
I think it's a Google survey, so it'll
It'll be
automatically.
online?
Yes,
We're hoping to send it out through Blackboard Connect, which is our sort of massive emailing system or massive phone call system. So we can send the link out through an email to all parents, and they just click on the link and then can fill out the Google form.
And how do we get those who are not linked?
If we don't have an email address from you, we would have to give a hard copy to the parent.
And then in terms of rolling out, so I noticed on here, elementary parent, junior high parent, high school, and then more than one level. You might have different responses for the front office at your elementary than at your high school.
yes,
Perhaps. So
yes.
parents can do more than one survey?
Well,
based
they could
on-
do one per child.
Right.
I think then you'll get a more accurate.
Aren't we gonna try to do one per school so we get that feedback too, on this one?
One per school.
Yeah, on this survey, so like, cause you, in Google, you can send out
Yeah.
5 different surveys, they're all the same, but the link is different, so that all the parents from one school would be reporting
site.
they want to, to that site.
Right, because if you
So-
have parents from all elementaries answering and they say that it needs work in one area, you don't know what.
But you don't know
elementary
which
you're to-
site.
Right, so we want that
Yeah, we can do
feedback.
that. We can make each.
We can disaggregate that,
Mhm.
yeah.
And it would be anonymous?
Yes, yes.
Like, I mean, you're obviously gonna get much better data in any survey if it's anonymous.
Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways, face-to-face input is good because you can clarify and you can kind of hear the tone and that kind of thing. But I think you get better numbers when you do just an anonymous survey. So I like to do both with the LCAP, survey that's anonymous, but also face-to-face meetings too, like ELAC meetings, COPA meetings, PTO meetings, school site council, that kind of thing.
Is there any way to add on to the survey a sort of other comments? Yeah. Oh, yeah, comments, right,
There
additional
is a-
ideas, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a narrative
Yep,
section.
I see it.
Okay, we go to the last priority. The last one is climate. And to assess climate, we do the California Healthy Kids Survey. We call it the CHICS. So when I say CHICS, you know I'm talking about the California Healthy Kids Survey.
We know you're from the 60s.
And so we do the California Healthy Kids Survey to grades
7, 9, 11.
7, 9, and 11. We don't do it in grade 5 In grades 7, 9, and 11, we do passive consent. Grade 5 requires active consent, so we don't do it in grade 5. So instead, we have a locally developed survey that was developed at Miramani that's given to 5th graders on climate. Climate, playground issues, bullying, is there an adult to whom you can go if you want to talk, that kind of thing. So we'll be gathering the data from those two student surveys from grades 7, 9, and 11 from the chicks, and then the grade 5.
Similar anonymous survey?
Yeah, the chicks, both actually. So that's how we assess, and one of the requirements, we always have a requirement, is that you report to your local school board the local indicators, so that's why I'm here tonight. Okay, any other questions? Okay.
You know how you're gonna do the student one? We hand it out in class?
Yes, I may, for example, at Summit, I did hard copy and just handed it out in class. I don't know how the other schools,
I do it on Google.
on Google,
They're online, yeah.
online?
In the class with the teacher, though, the class goes together to the computer lab.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
did it both hard copy and online.
both,
The teacher's company.
okay.
So how low do we go, so to speak? I mean, what age do we start?
Just 5th grade.
We just did
Just
5th
okay.
grade. Mhm.
Yeah, but I do it to third, that's about as low as I'll go with it. Third grade. This one, yeah.
The playgrounds survey.
But the other ones just go to, just for 5th grade for everyone else? I mean, Catherine uses 3rd and 4th,
I
but,
use it at my school, but we're gonna be using this as the indicator that. we're
The
gonna use
indicator
fifth
for the
grade.
elementary band, we're just
Oh,
doing
got it.
5th grade. Yeah.
Got it.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Cheryl, and it kind of ties right in, because see, the dashboard are all these indicators, and now Cheryl is going to talk about that academic indicator, which is the CASP scores.
Actually, we're going to focus on the SBAC scores today. Okay, so I think I have my PowerPoint working. You have the PowerPoint in front of you. There was one error, so you hopefully had page 12 of the PowerPoint to switch out. As always, we love the interaction, so feel free to stop me at each slide and ask questions. And of course, we have all of our administrators here to chime in and offer commentary. So as a reminder, the students in grades 3rd through 8th grade plus grade 11 take the Smarter Balance test, or we usually call it the SBAC, every spring. And this is the 3rd year that we have scores that we can see from the students, although they potentially could have participated 5 times because we did a pilot study and then a pilot study and a field study with the test before we ended up with the first year of test scores in 2015. This is, of course, there's a huge shift that happened. Our state adopted the Common Core state standards in 2010, and it's very, very different. Both the expectations in language arts and math are very different, and the test taking experience is very different. So just as some reminders, refresh everybody's memory, key shifts in language arts. Was a shift in the balance from literary to informational text, more informational text. A shift to text-dependent questions, which required a close reading of the text and using the text for evidence as your supporting answers, which is part of the SBAC test. An emphasis on academic vocabulary instead of literary terminology, and daily encounters with complex text instead of just leveled readers. So those are some differences in language arts. In mathematics, we saw a huge shift, a narrowing in the amount of concepts students learned in a year, but going much, much deeper and having to take the time to really explain their thinking in math and listen to fellow students explain their thinking in math. So there's a lot more reading and writing that happens in math courses now, as well as on the test. So all students now, when they take the spring state test, they're doing it on a computer, and the computer, there's 4 different sessions essentially. There's 2 for math and 2 for language arts. The 2 for math, there's a CAT test, which is an adaptive test. It's a little bit more like your multiple choice type answers, but they're not all multiple choice, and many of them require a sentence or 2 explanation. But it's adaptive in that if kids answer correctly or incorrectly, the test changes the next questions to get harder or easier, so you can really see how well the students are doing in the content area. But then there's a performance task session where students are really expected to write a lot. So they're looking at real world problems, expected to really show their critical thinking on the skills, and not only do, for example, in math, not only do the calculations, but then explain in paragraph form how they got their answer and why they think their data defends their argument about whatever they're answering.
So, in my opinion, having had a lot of math children,
yeah,
that's a nightmare.
a little bit,
Because
yeah.
what math kids love is that they can get away from all that reading and having to describe, and
For
they
s-
just know things
Yeah.
and they want to keep going.
For some students, it's been a real struggle, yeah, to move away from just simply doing calculation and really doing a lot more explanation of why their calculations prove something or don't prove something, depending on how they turned out. So again, so the same happens in language arts. There's the CAT version of the test, and then there's the performance task version of the test. And so in that part, students are expected to write, in some cases, 3 to 4 multi-paragraph essays for their answers. And of course, that's very different than the old CSTs where it was just all multiple choice. And this is all grade levels. Even 3rd graders are expected to write paragraphs as they're answering these questions. So it's very difficult.
All on computers, so.
All on computers.
Does typing
Absolutely.
become an issue?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't actually translate what's in your head onto the computer?
So I would say that surprisingly, students have risen to the challenge, but no doubt there are some difficulties there. And it does take a lot of practice and a lot of gearing up for the test to make sure that the kids have the right skills with the computers to be able to access the test.
And I remember with my oldest son, typing was the more robustly taught. Are we actively teaching typing?
We have typing programs starting in elementary, and so students are regularly practicing typing skills.
So
Yeah.
earlier it used to be, like at TOPA, it was 4th grade. Obviously, it's happening.
We're starting younger
before
now,
that.
yeah. And of course, when you look at Chromebooks and access to computers, it's starting in kindergarten. On a regular basis, kindergartners are working on Chromebooks and PCs. Okay, so those are just some changes, just to kind of remind us of where we're at. And so now we're going to look at a little bit of data here, or a lot of data, I should say. This first graph shows us, so there's 4 levels that a student can fall in. They can exceed the standard, meet the standard, nearly meet the standard, or not meet the standard. So when we talk about data and when we look at the state website, what we usually look at are the percentage of students that meet or exceed the standard. That's sort of the determiner of if we're getting enough kids to master the standard. So when you look, for example, at that blue line, that's language arts. You can see that, for example, 43% of our students across the district are meeting the standards. They're either meeting or exceeding the standards in 3rd grade, 39% in 4th grade. I don't need to read them all to you, but you can kind of see there. We see some highlights here are among our 6th graders and our 11th graders in language arts. Our 6th graders, 54% of them met or exceeded the standard, and in 11th grade, 61% met or exceeded the standard.
So can I ask about that?
Yeah.
So what curriculum-wise, maybe Carol and Javier, happens in the junior high level that obviously I'm not seeing a consort, or whatever you call them.
A cohort.
A cohort.
There are some later on in here.
But it seems in general that they're struggling more with.
I would be happy to let people talk, but I will share with you when we look at the next graph and we look at the state and the county, while they don't have as many variations, we do see just a general typical upward trend with the 11th graders even across the county and the state doing much better. So we might take that into consideration. I'll say one more thing before I let other people answer as well. that with being such a small district and having so few students in each cohort, it only takes a few variables to send our data sort of, to skew into peaks and valleys. Where when you look at the next chart for just 1 second, you see more of a, straight line. You don't see as many peaks and valleys. But what you do see overall, which we're consistent with, is just a general upward trend of, from 3rd grade to 11th grade, more students eventually meeting the standard. Did anybody want to add any commentary on?
Now, the one thing I'd like to
Potentially.
add about the ELA in 8th grade is last year we adopted a 2-year pilot, and last year was the first year that we had a program in English in ELA. So typically when we have that, we do experience a bit of a dip. And like Marilyn pointed out when she was talking, is when you adopt a new thing, the first year, not only do the students struggle with it, but the teachers also struggle with it. I remember we went through the same thing in math when we got the CMP3 book the first year. It was a struggle for the kids, but it was also a struggle for the teachers. And trying to learn the material and the new way to do that particular curriculum. So we had it last year, and I've had some conversations with our English department specifically about, is that something that we want to pursue? Is that something that is meeting our needs? So they're looking into that. This is the 2nd year of that pilot. After this year, we want to decide whether we want to keep it or not. And if we do decide to keep it, it's going to be, I believe, it's a 4 or a 6-year term that we're going to sign up with this publisher. That's what we decide to do. So yeah, last year was the first year that we had this new College Board English curriculum used, and you can see that's a reflection of the scores in math.
Could you speak
in English?
Javier, could you talk about like what kinds of things are different such that you would expect the scores to be lower? Like what are the things that will smooth out over time or get better over time that suffer when you do something new? Is it just the instructors just aren't as
A lot of it, I think, is the comfort level that the teachers would have and the familiarity that they have with the curriculum. I can speak from the math perspective. That's sort of my thing. That for me, it took me about a year and a half to 2 years for me to actually become comfortable with the CMP3 curriculum that we had adopted 3 years ago. So I think that just part of it is that familiarity with not only being able to teach the new material, but also seeing the sort of the bigger picture. So why am I doing this now? Because that's going to lead you to something else in the future. So it's just when I look at the scores, because that's the first thing I noticed when I was looking at the data, is that there's a dip in the 8th grade. And when I asked the teachers to sort of brainstorm why do we experience that? Because when we look at our 7th grade and 8th grade ELA and math, that's when we experienced the biggest drop by far. And it was pretty substantial. And the only thing that can come to mind is the fact that we have this new thing that we're experimenting on still with the ELA curriculum. So.
No, in the elementary, the ELA curriculum is so robust and there's so many components to it that teachers don't use all of it. And so it takes a good year at least to get through it to decide, well, which pieces are really the ones that would work the best with the kids, because they just don't know the program yet. So that could be part of it too.
I was going to add, I mean, I think all of us who have been involved in education know that there's sort of a cynical potential for any school to teach to the test.
Mm-hmm.
That none of us would want our kid to be in a classroom talking about English and not be spending real time talking about ideas and sharing, plots and what moved you in that story and why was that story scary, and that stuff doesn't feel to me like it would find its way as easily into a test, but we certainly want to spend a lot of time on it. And so I just wonder, are there schools out there that go like, we're going to just teach the test, we're going to just get curriculum that just gets us, basically replicates what this test is going to be, and then we'll look marginally better, but.
There are, but I would say the thing that I've appreciated most about the new set of Common Core standards is that they really, if you really teach to the test, you're actually teaching some very crucial skills for kids to have. So I don't see it as a disadvantage. For example, the shift to looking at a text and using the text as evidence as you're building an argument for whatever you're saying about, the question that you're answering. That's a life skill. So if that's on the test and we're teaching the test, I'm all for it, because you really can't function in college if you don't have that skill. And in most workforce, jobs, you need those skills. So I would say the shift has led to us being able to teach the test, so to speak, with more comfort, because the skills that they're requiring are really, truly, I think they really tried to find life skills as, essential skills that kids need to put into the Common Core standards and then therefore test on the exam. I don't know if I answered your question, but certainly
you
we
did,
still,
yeah.
we
I
still want that
imagine,
robust
yeah.
conversation,
Yeah.
but the skills that are being tested on, I think, are really important skills.
Yeah.
And the assessments that they have in their curriculum they mirror a lot of the same types of questioning they have on the assessments. So,
Yeah.
constructive responses, along performance tasks that they have to show their thinking and write multi-paragraphs of argument.
Yeah, I mean, I would just imagine, you guys come to us, with textbooks, and we invariably look at it and go, whatever you think, like when I get a haircut, you decide. But I would assume that there's a world out there of people from Wiley and somebody else coming in and selling you on a book and saying, this book, we've seen great, increases in test scores, and
They all say the same thing, don't they?
I would think that would be that there would be a lot of action there, because everyone has to do this.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of teachers appreciate that the types of assessments that they include in the book are what the kids, how they're gonna be tested.
Mhm.
So I know that when we were looking at the curriculum, they were looking for that. They wanted to make sure that they were being asked those critical thinking questions. And
You say in the same vocabulary. That's an area that's so tricky.
Right.
Testing.
Especially, again, with the shift from literary terminology to more academic vocabulary. We needed to make sure that was in the textbooks, in the curriculum, so the kids are seeing it and experiencing it, and then more prepared. Okay, we haven't gotten through very many slides, so. Okay, back to the first slide, just to kind of remind you, the red line graph there is how we did in mathematics. Again, this is the percentage of students in each grade level that met or exceeded the standard. And I'm just going to go 2 slides ahead just to see how that looks when you put that line next to the county and the state. What we see in math is a similar downward trend. So where we saw an upward trend as kids go up in the grade levels in language arts, we see this downward trend in mathematics. Obviously, we see a good dip here in 5th grade, which we can talk a little bit about. And then we want to celebrate our 6th grade students there who had that nice peak. But overall, I think we're really trending with the state and the county in math scores.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, let me ask Kate, what are we, not what, what are we doing wrong in 5th grade? What happens in the 5th grade book that is making students go, whoa?
Yeah. And before Kate answers, I'll just tell you that we've noticed a 5th grade dip for a couple of years now. And so we just last week were looking back to CST to see if that 5th grade math dip happened then, and it did. It wasn't as deep as what we're seeing now, but it seems that 5th grade, for whatever reason, and maybe Kate can talk to that a little bit, for whatever reason, that 5th grade year in mathematics has been difficult for our students, even back when it was the old test and the old set of standards.
the good news is when you look at the cohorts, they seem to bounce back up again. So
Right. They dip in 5th and somehow make it back up. Do you want to talk a little bit?
Sure, and I do see that we have a pretty significant conceptual change there that happens in the 5th grade. So you're going from a lot of the more basic skills to sort of this broader thinking that starts to shift in 5th grade. What I mean by that is before you're doing a lot of the simple calculations, you're doing addition, subtraction, and you're working through those and you're looking at them deeply now through the Common Core state standards. But in 5th grade now, you're applying what you've already learned within those realms to new areas. So you're starting to get into the decimals, you're getting into the fractions, things that really are a little more abstract to kids than in prior grades. So I think there is just a conceptual shift there, and also how the Common Core state standards address those. There's also a little bit of a roundabout teaching with it. So you're bouncing sort of between these ideas and then back ultimately to the starting point. And what I'm seeing with the 5th graders is that in and of itself is a struggle. So they're getting little chunks of it and bouncing it back, and it really does impact how well they're learning it in 6th grade. So last year I was teaching the 5th grade curriculum. It felt almost choppy and a little bit disjointed. You come back into 6th grade and you see where all those pieces were starting to pile into it. So I almost feel like in a lot of ways it's a building
building block for the middle school curriculum. If that makes sense.
Yes, thanks
I
for
guess
sharing that.
my concern on this, and maybe somebody has some input, is in years past, you know, you can see we're kind of with the trend line, but we're usually like a little bit above it. And, you know, it's that fifth grade dip is just so low. I mean, you can see the others dip too. But other school districts have not had the curriculum any longer than we have. And we seem to be struggling more at some key points here. And when we get to it, there are some cohorts that really tanked. And I hope that we're trying to figure that out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is, we've had how many conversations in the last weeks
45 minutes.
about how to address some of these concerns. So we can definitely share as we go along.
Great.
Any more questions on that? All right, so it's always nice to see where we're at, comparatively speaking. So the next graph after this is going to show you kind of how we ranked in our language arts and mathematics achievement, comparatively speaking, to the local districts around us. But before we look at that slide, I thought it was really important to just create a little context. This graph shows you with each unified district locally around us, it shows you their unduplicated count, their students, their percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged, and their percentage of students that are English learners. So if you just kind of look at students that potentially need the most supports, among these 9 districts, we're falling about 5th in neediest populations, with Ventura Unified sort of having a similar profile to us, and maybe Moore Park Unified kind of having a similar profile to us. So kind of having that in context, when you go to the next slide, you can now see I sort of arranged them in, let me change slides. The districts that had the highest performance, the highest achievement, kind of down to the lowest achievement, and then I just ended there with the county and the state. It's not surprising, I don't think, to most of us that Oak Park did the best, right? When you look back, they have significantly less students that need extra supports and that sort of thing. But there are some lessons to be learned here, because among these 9, we're ranking 7th, right? And so certainly when you look at Carpinteria Unified or Ventura Unified, who do have slightly higher numbers or percentages of students that potentially need extra support, and yet they're doing a little bit better than us. So I think that it's good discussion for all of us to look at maybe some of the things they're doing. It's really difficult to figure out all the variables that could be playing into it. Certainly they might be in a financially better position than us.
Sure, you've got a lot of students, so you get more money.
Sure.
It's easier to address some of those
Potentially
issues.
lower class sizes. So, it's not fair to make it just a direct comparison. You need to kind of look at all the different variables that could play into it. But if there are some takeaways, or if they are doing some things, we know in Ventura Unified they have more teachers on special assignment doing professional development. Maybe that's a takeaway. Maybe it's the professional development piece that's helping them. So, these are good conversations that we can have and, look into what other districts might be doing.
Or it could be that just 1 or 2 of these cohorts is dragging down all the numbers.
Absolutely, and that's why
it kind of looks like that to me.
Yeah, it absolutely. If you have a cohort or 2 that is maybe just a lower achieving cohort, then that can drag down some of the.
Or they're having a bad year.
Sure.
Because that's what I'm seeing in the cohort charts.
Yeah.
That they're like 2 of them, they're just.
Dipped.
This has been a terrible year for them.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I
One of those cohorts,
I suspect it's not their fault.
Well, for example, one of the cohorts I believe is that took a pretty good dip is from that 4th to 5th grade year in math, for example.
Right.
So now we sort of have a little bit of explanation why, when you're just looking at 2 data points in a cohort or for a cohort, you can kind of maybe explain why that year they dipped. But until we have more data points, we won't kind of know the general trajectory.
But it's still, we're comparing to other districts that have the same, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
Granted, there are reasons why it's a tough year for everybody, but why are we suffering more than others?
Well,
That's
and
a
at
good
what
point.
point in like how many years do you need before you can determine, and I hate to say this, but sort of like, there's a really good reason where teachers are seeing the students struggle versus, you know, is it something to do with our faculty, or, you know, right, is there a weakness, like what you're talking about, needing that support, that
More professional development.
right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I noticed in ELA a dip from 3rd grade to 4th grade in every cohort.
Right.
I mean, you know, and so something, what do we teach in 4th grade that's harder for them to
Absolutely.
get, that's different? Our words are bigger, or our expectations are bigger that can explain some of that? Or is it something where we need more professional development?
Absolutely.
Because I know, I mean, I've been to a lot of the campuses, and everyone really cares, and everyone's
That's
really
right.
working hard, and everyone is passionate about their job, so if they need support, we need to know it.
And we need to identify that and
Identify
provide
it,
that.
right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. 100%, these are the conversations we're having right now. Try to address it. Okay, so just because we are, you know, so unique in our district, we thought it would be good to look across the state and try to identify other districts that have a little bit more of the unique profile that we have. So we were able to identify 8 other districts, unified districts, that have the same, roughly the same enrollment that we have. And then we looked at their unduplicated count just to, again, kind of give that identification of how many of their students, what percentage of their students might need a little extra support when it comes to achievement on tests. So again, among these 9, we're sort of second with the amount of students that we have that might need extra support.
So to read this, so we have fewer students who are unduplicated
Yeah.
than, say, Bear Valley. But
Right.
we have the similar number of enrollments.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
And then, so the next slide shows that among these 9, we're ranked about 4th with student achievement. We're pretty close to the 2 next to us, Carpinteria again and Linden. But again, some lessons to be learned because Carpinteria and Weisburn have slightly higher, populations of students that require, extra support. And so perhaps again, we can look to those districts, see what they're doing, and perhaps draw some conclusions from that. It's possible, again, that there's just so many variables that it's not always easy to figure out what they might be doing that's different. But again, we just want to be mindful of where we're at and certainly look to other districts if people are doing things.
But if that
Well-
that number is bigger, like obviously Oxnard, they get a lot more money because
Yeah,
of that.
absolutely. So we know right off the bat, just by having the higher population of students with extra needs, they get extra support, extra financial support. So yeah, that's a variable right now that right
We need
there.
a necessary small district extra funding.
We
Governor,
would
let's
like
go to
that.
the governor.
Okay, so then moving into our student groups. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't actually look at our comparison, did I? Oh, no, I did. Okay, so yeah, we ranked 4th there. Okay, so into student groups now. So, our state and certainly, the research that's out there and everything is indicating that our job is really to be tracking our student groups and to really make sure that we are looking at the achievement gap and trying to address the achievement gap, trying to decrease the achievement gap. So what you're looking at when you see this graph, you're seeing the point difference. So to be clear, the point difference between the students. So for example, the first, this is economically disadvantaged compared to the students that are not economically disadvantaged. In 2015, we saw a 23-point difference. In 2016, a 29-point difference. And then in 2017, a 29-point difference. So in all of these different student groups, Hispanic, Latino, when they're compared to their white counterparts, English only and initially fluent students compared to language learners or English learners. The next set is the English only and initially fluent students compared to the reclassified group of students. And then the last set there are students in special education or receiving special education services compared to the students that are not. What we are seeing are some pretty significant gaps, and unfortunately, we're not really seeing that downward trend that we would want to see, right? We would want to be reducing the gap. So a couple of highlights, though. We did see a reduction in the gap from 2016 and 2017 in our English learner population. And then what's really nice to see is how small the gap is among our reclassified students. So those students that are coming to us and they're English learners, and then after a few years becoming fluent in the language, and then falling into that next category of being in the group of reclassified kids, they're actually doing very well compared to their counterparts. So that's really, those are some great successes. But again, we see areas in language arts where we need to really work on reducing that gap.
Is there any way in the SPED columns that we know the difference between maybe a student who has an IEP and needs an extra time on a test versus a student who's in the pulled out really special?
So at least
needs?
on the state website where I'm pulling all this data, I don't have a way to differentiate among, for example, the different disabilities, or like you're saying, kind of the amount of need each student has. It obviously doesn't include the kids who have the severest needs who don't take the SBAC test. They take a different test.
Okay.
But all students that take the SBAC test that are on an IEP fall into this group. I don't know if there's any other way to get the data. So, okay, then for math, again, same explanation. This is just the point difference, so the achievement gap for our student groups. We see a nice downward trend in math, which is what we'd want to see everywhere in our Hispanic Latino group compared to the white students. We see a little bit of a downward movement, a decrease in the gap in our English learners. Again, we see that nice small gap in our reclassified English learners. But then unfortunately we do see some increases there in our economically disadvantaged students and our special education population.
And the numbers are not as big, but that's because our math students who are not doing as well in general.
In general, yeah. Any commentary on student groups before we move on? Okay, so the next little set of slides here are those cohorts. And so now that we have 3 years of data or 3 data points, normally when we look at data, and especially the way the state looks at data, they're really looking at, the grade levels. But it is sort of like comparing apples and oranges because each year you're looking at a different group of kids in the grade level. So I like to kind of think of it as looking at this information diagonally, right? So you take a look at those third graders. In 2014-15, you had 36.7% passing the test or meeting or exceeding the standards in language arts. And then in 15-16, 39.7% were passing, and then 41.4% in 16-17. So that's just kind of a snapshot of what I pulled from this data to make these line graphs that come next. And so 4 out of the 6 cohorts, when you look at their first data point and their final data point, are making at least some sort of upward trajectory. It's fairly early to tell, especially some of these that only have 2 data points. For example, the class of 2025, we see that dip, right, in their scores. We had 47% meeting or exceeding the standard in 2016, and then only 37% in 2017. But again, it kind of falls with the trend we saw before, right, of 4th grade being a tougher year in language arts. So, but again, we would hope that as we have more data points that we'll catch them back up. In math, similar results. So again, just taking this data and sort of looking at it diagonally as a cohort, you end up with similar results. 4 of the 6 at least we ended up from their first data point to their final data point with more students meeting or exceeding the standards.
So what's going on in the 11th grade? I know they're different cohorts, but from 52 to 33 is a very big difference. From 2014-15, it was 52%, and in 2016-17, it was 33%.
But wouldn't
I'm
those
sorry.
11th graders in 2014-15 have been on the old common, or before Common Core, so they were doing the traditional?
But they're still taking this kind of test. So that's what I'm saying, it's like maybe we stick with the old books, even though you have the new test. I mean, if the new books are making the test harder for them,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I think we need to look at the comparison to the county and the state, because I mean, I've seen it in almost every year. The scores vary based on how the tests are written.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, that's
And so you get an easy test year, and then you get better scores, and you get a harder test year, and you get lower scores.
the test is changing. That's the thing too. I mean, this is only the third year that the test is out, so they are recalibrating at the state level as they're looking at how the scores come out, right? Dropping items that obviously weren't valid and adding items that they think will be. So that's still happening at that level as well. So.
But it could be, I mean, we might see that if we do compare the data, that we still have an issue.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
we still
again,
don't.
just in trend to watch, is sort of like now, and a trend to watch is, I mean, was it 2 years ago when we changed the math? Is this the third year?
Well, that's what I'm,
No, but I mean, it's not just the math textbooks, but didn't we change the,
the classes.
yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
not just algebra, geometry.
That's what I was
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
is
So it's
those
like
kids
They're
earlier were,
integrated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
integrated, right. Math
and
one,
now we're
math two,
integrated,
math
and
three.
this is the first year? The 11th graders this year are the first year, so these guys would have all been the same, is that right? These guys weren't integrated, none of us.
2000.
The
This
11th graders
11th
last
grade year is the
spring.
first integrated year.
And talk about
So I'm
changing,
wrong.
just an interesting note, is 2 years ago, there was an activity that we did with our 7th and 8th graders for the performance test.
Mm-hmm.
There was a worksheet that came from the state, they said, here's your performance test for the test, that was years ago. And last year, they didn't have that. So talk about modifying the test, it's a living, breathing entity, it's constantly changing. Last year, I had it on my schedule, oh, this is the time that I'm gonna use for the performance test activity. Then I found out, there's no such a
You
thing.
don't have to do it.
Oh, what am I gonna do with them now? You know, but it is changing, it is definitely changing, changing by every year.
Every year.
Mhm.
But even with the old tests, it was the same thing. You'd have, everybody did better some years and everybody did worse some years.
Right. Okay,
I
so.
don't know, but I'm concerned though, I mean, the cohorts that go up and down, I mean, I consider some of that maybe the test, but the ones that just keep going down and down and down.
Yeah, and I think
That's not
again, we won't
necessary.
know more until we see more data points just specifically representing the cohorts. I mean, certainly we can go back and look at math and the general trajectory down, but that is again a different set of kids in each grade level that you're looking at when you go back to those graphs.
No, I'm looking at the cohorts.
Okay, so I'm suggesting that we just need a little more time then to have more data points to see really where it's headed.
Right, I still want them to go off the chart.
We don't either. We don't either.
Carol, have you ever done any, attempted to correlate performance on these tests to instructional hours, minutes, whatever? I mean, I just wonder, you know, we're a school that gets out of school on Wednesday at noon. I wonder how we do compared to schools that don't.
Well, you know, one of the things we've all been doing as principals is looking at some of
And I'm
these.
talking about elementary school, obviously.
Yeah, we've looked at some of the salient research lately, and John Hattie's work is something that comes to mind when you ask that, because what he looked at was close to 200 variables to try to determine what are the variables that are the most effective at increasing student achievement, and things like school schedules and the calendar, the year, all that stuff was on there, and those really ranked really relatively low as far as their effect size. And certainly he came out with things that rank really high, and those are the things that we've really been talking about, how we're going to integrate more of looking at common assessments, having regular assessments, working in data teams, which I know you've heard me talk about, professional learning communities. Those are the pieces that when you look at his data and you look at the variables he's looked at, those are the things that have the biggest impact. And what we do know, and Jane already said it, is our teachers are working so hard. They are working very hard, and they definitely care. I mean, they care about these scores as much as any of us in this room. But it is possible that we're maybe spending some of our time in areas or doing things that fall into those variables that have less of an impact, as John Hattie has brought forth to us. And maybe what we need to do is shift a little bit into those variables, those things that will have the maximum impact. And so certainly those are active discussions we're having, and we have some next steps to work on implementing that.
Is differentiation a significant thing? Like being able to take smaller groups of kids with different levels of ability and?
No, actually not as much. Isn't that surprising?
Yeah,
It really comes down to, I would say, a couple key things. Really looking at data, the teacher identifying the data to change what they're doing, to impact their instruction, to change their instruction, and the data, using the data to provide authentic feedback to the student. So using that data to say, here student, here's where you're at, and here are the things that you need to do to get to the very next level, and providing example work and samples to really show the kid where they need to go. So it's, as John Hattie kind of explains it, it's like our kids don't always know where they're supposed to go. They don't really know what the next steps are. They're just kind of waiting for it to be delivered to them. So we need to be more explicit about helping them along those paths.
That's exciting.
I think it's exciting, but we're
We showed this video, John had a video at our professional development day, and it was just amazing because the highest correlation was the teacher.
yeah.
And way down here, schedules, class size, those kinds of things, way down here had a very low correlation.
So our elementary teachers saw the
Yeah,
video.
the elementary teachers.
Sort of
And
like,
they were-
yeah, it's like Moneyball, you know,
Mhm.
for school.
Yeah.
Except I'm sure the teachers went, oh yeah,
Yeah.
duh.
We're not the only
Right?
Um,
Teachers are the,
But you know what I
Well,
mean,
they
right?
were. I
It's
think
all
they were
data.
so honored that that was being, exalted. Like you are the person. That's the key thing that will impact achievement is the teacher sitting in the classroom. But then it's also the teacher in the classroom doing some of these strategies. Looking at the data, using the data to drive their instruction. Really, again, offering that authentic feedback explicitly to students so that they know where they need to go next. I mean, there are some skill sets there that I think go back to that professional development. We've been talking about how we're going to get teachers together in rooms, find that time, show them what this looks like because they haven't necessarily been in the practice of it. Some of them have, some of them are doing it, but to the extent that it's probably needing to be done, we really have work to do, I would say.
We've had some really dynamic conversations among ELT. We so appreciate having Cheryl as the assistant superintendent and being able to guide some of our conversations along those lines. And one of the discussions that was very scary to even contemplate was just how we spend our extra funding, what kind of resource and pullout we have going on right now. Is that something we should continue doing? The data analysis that Cheryl mentioned is something that has so much potential, but how to get there and how to afford to be able to do that. There's just been some really dynamic conversations. I'm sure you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great for us to be able to interact with the teachers in that way because, the things I wonder about are, do any teachers feel hamstrung? Do they feel like they're forced to follow a certain approach that's not necessarily intuitively what they think they need to be doing? And would that have an effect?
I think, and one of the things John Hattie brings forth is, I think that they do feel very compelled to get through all the material for the year. And that is one of the things that he suggests is not necessarily the most effective thing. Maybe for some students, and that's where differentiation comes in, but for other students, really just identifying essential standards, and this goes into another researcher, Robert Marzano, who talks about, you've got to narrow down the most essential things and then ensure that every kid is mastering that. And that takes some skill. It's very freeing. I think it'll be freeing for the teachers. Yeah. I mean, we're starting to have these discussions, but to know that, hey, if I don't get through all 12 units, it's actually okay. What matters more is that we're making sure that every kid, masters the essential standards.
In the old standards, the teachers were given, they had blueprints too, so they knew on the test, when the kids took the test, approximately how many items there would be for this type of a question, or how many for this one. They don't have the roadmap right now with the CAS. And so I think there's this pressure of, I have to teach it all because I don't know what they're gonna put, what they're gonna weigh as heavy. So that's gonna be a conversation we're gonna have with the teachers to figure out what are the essential standards. We're gonna have to identify them.
And if I can add to that, that's kind of the challenge that we're faced with because we absolutely agree that, getting test results and analyzing the results to use that to drive changes in our instruction, we don't get that with these compared to, you know, I can offer an analogy as an AP teacher, you know, when I get the results, it breaks down every single chapter, and it kind of tells me, you know, if I was weak in teaching a particular chapter, I can go back there. So it provides far more specific detail that allows me to change my instruction to improve from year to year. I think this test is just too new, and it doesn't provide enough data for us to be able to get that information to impact instruction.
It's really just sort of big, sort of, the only thing that we're getting from this are just signposts, I would say, like, okay, how are enough students meeting and exceeding the standards? Where are our achievement gaps? But really, it does come down to more specific data. And again, it really has to be on a systematic, regular basis that you're looking at that data, so that, again, even you had great detailed information, but that comes a year late, right? So you can't use it to benefit the kids that year. You can use it to benefit the kids the year after, but we need data in a timely manner to benefit the kids right there, sitting here this year in our classrooms.
So when you say that, Cheryl, does that mean more assessments through the year? Are you talking about more tests?
Well, what we're looking at are, we're stealing.
We need
Formative.
formative assessments along the way, and we should never base a decision on a summative test anyway, on one summative test. So really what we need are formative assessments and have some uniformity in the district on these formative assessments, almost like a quick check.
We've been calling them quick checks.
Quick check. And then the teacher can really zero in, oh boy, we didn't do well on contractions, or whatever it might be, or detail in writing an essay. And so teachers will really use that data to drive the instruction.
And to go back to the student and say, here, look, here's where you're at, here's where you need to go, and here's some examples of what it looks like to go there.
And they're doing assessments every Friday anyway.
Right. It'll be different testing and used differently, right? So among the teachers.
And it'll be district-wide, it won't be different here and
That's
there
right.
versus.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I like what I'm hearing. I'm just wondering if some of these larger districts that are doing better, if they have access to information about what the state thinks is important on these tests.
I don't think anybody has exactly what's, like like Catherine was saying, there used to be these, what do they call them? Blueprints. And so you knew exactly how many of certain types of questions, like they might have 10 questions on decimals and only one question on fractions. So, but that's not the case anymore.
The only
But
question that we got back in the math and the English is 3 subcategories for the math, which tells the teacher how they did in those 3 subcategories. But even those 3 subcategories are very broad.
And they're more in the critical
You need to
thinking.
work on quadratics more, or you need to work on decimals more, no.
Right.
I
It's,
remember when you showed them to us, it
Yeah.
didn't seem like they were
Very
helpful.
vague.
Mhm.
Good.
But one of the tools that we do have that we're gonna be, when we meet next time, we're gonna be going over is in the state provides an interim assessment that's very much like the CASP assessment. And they also have blocks of like standards that are short, little quick checks that the teachers can be using too. So we're gonna look through those and see if there's something, a tool already in there. They have constructive response, they have performance tasks in there, so again, very similar to how we want the kids to think, and also how they're going to be assessed.
and I'll say in elementary, we're a little ahead of the game, at least as far as this goes, because we spent a lot of time creating a standards-based report card. And in that standards-based report card at each grade level, we've already identified in language arts and mathematics which are the key standards, which are the essential standards. So, from there, we can then go in and pull some of these assessments that we think will be the best to both provide the teacher valuable information to guide their instruction, but also to be able to give feedback to the students about where they're at and where they need to go.
So the last line on this slide is that we're gonna need to evaluate how best to offer support, et cetera.
Yeah.
So where will we see that articulated as that evolves?
I think what you'll see is teachers working in teams, evaluating data. I think that you'll see, potentially we'd be able to show you some of these assessment tools that we're using.
So will that be summarized, say, in like the LCAP, or where will we see those strategies articulated as you decide what you wanna implement?
Probably the single plan.
A single plan.
And that's it, okay.
And one of the things that Cheryl shared with us, the EDEMS website,
Yeah.
I know you shared with me recently, and that is the website which provides us with all the data of our kids. But not only that, it actually provides with some potential powerful tools to use for generating, assessments.
And there's an assessment bank in there already. So that's actually,
That's something we're exploring.
that's some of our next meetings, is exploring the different assessment tools that are out there and then trying to pick some tools that would work most efficiently for our teachers.
And I thought I heard somewhere, maybe I'm making it up, that there were, but that's okay. That there were some classes that really did quite well.
Absolutely.
Some of the testing.
Yeah.
So we're going to those teachers and finding out what they did.
We've had some of those conversations too. Yeah, definitely. And please know the teachers and the principals, they're getting in rooms together and they're looking at all this data too and trying to determine some of the things that at least in the short term can be addressed if there's anything that stands out as rationale for why we might have done very well or not done so well. Okay, so.
I can share just, my fifth grade staff is just devastated by these math scores. And they want to understand why they look the way they do. In fact, one of them, she's like, maybe I just need to move to second grade. Or maybe I'm just not a good fifth grade math teacher. And I said, no. We see a dip everywhere. We're going to fix this. And
Yeah.
you are a good fifth grade math teacher. So
The
we just
concern
gotta
is
figure
out there.
What we're missing in this big picture.
Yeah.
So.
So as far as the conclusions go, I think we've basically pointed most of this out already. Generally speaking, I think we follow the same trends as the state and the county, just coming in a little bit short with our achievement comparatively speaking. Highlights were those sixth graders and 11th graders and their language arts scores. And again, just some initial positive movement with our cohorts that we can now see. And then, of course, the areas for focus are trying to improve overall our scores. We know we were a little bit under the county and the state as well as our local districts. And then really overall work on reducing those achievement gaps. It is the highest priority to make sure that we're focusing on that and working on that. So.
All right. Great conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Great.
On a slightly different topic, since I have all the principals here, I was contacted by somebody from the Friends of the Library Board. They received a grant to, the free little libraries that are popping up everywhere, to build more of those in underserved areas and specifically putting in books that are in the Spanish language. I know they really want one up in Upper Ojai, and we're gonna talk to you, Marilyn, but they want to know where you guys think they need to go in places where kids don't have access to books, like Miners Oaks, where the library hours are really short. So if you guys can think of places or,
It would
thoughts on
also,
that.
not only that, but it would be helpful to let the community know where they are, because,
And
right, when you're
that's the
clearing out
idea.
bookshelves, it'd be
Absolutely.
great to take them.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, any further questions or comments?
Bill, did you wanna talk about this? Is that what you say, you're saying assessment here? Is it this the topic?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a public comment on this topic, so.
Okay. So for the record, my name is Bill Miley. My family has lived here since 1968. Had 3 kids that went through the whole schools. I assume you're all principals that kept you.
Oh,
You're okay, college. You used to be a principal.
She still is.
Never mind.
Oh, okay. You're a principal.
Difficult.
Anyway, so Cookie and I, my wife and I were very involved when our kids were in school, and they did really well. They all went to UCSB, and they're now in their 50s. So I kind of got away from the school, but now I'm getting back into it because I started a while ago, and now I'm very much involved in the landmark fiasco that's going on. I support the school district trustees. And now I'm interested in the assessment that you just presented. I looked at it before I came in the report. So I have a few questions that are kind of rhetorical, and then a couple asking, what do you need? So, one I'd like to know about, it appears that most of the charts show percentages of students meeting the English language or the math standards under 50%. Is the ultimate goal to get everybody to 100?
I would love that. Yes.
So I guess I was thinking about the individual student, you know, student A, student B, student 3. All of them, or each of them, would really like to be able to have a higher level of function for English and higher level of function for math. So that if there's only 32 or 35 or 36% of a cohort that are meeting the standards, there's a whole bunch of them that aren't going to do well if they don't get better, right? Okay. So I guess the question would be, what does the Ojai Unified School District need to get the percentages up higher? And I was listening to some of you mention these. So I have a list of 5 things. Money, number 1, you need more money. 2, you need more staff. 3, you need more individual help for each student who is trying to get better or not trying to get better. 4, you need more of student individual learning, which I guess might be the quick check program that you just talked about. I like that. That sounds really great. Immediate feedback. You're working on this project and you're digging too deep with the tool. The instructor says, whoa, stop before you wreck it. You know, this is the way to do it. Okay, I like that. And maybe number 5 is, as 60 Minutes said, more chess clubs. You saw that?
Yeah.
You see that? Okay. So, last thing here. I remember from the past study that educator John Dewey said, one thing I remember he said, anyone can learn anything if it's presented in words they know and concepts they understand. I don't know. Anybody talk about that anymore? Maybe I remembered it wrong, but I think it's neat that you have the assessment now, and boy, I sure like to see the percentages up 60, 70, and 80. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Will.
you.
We're gonna take a quick little break, just for a bathroom, and we will be back at 7:10. Well, since we're all back, I guess we'll begin. We are now on 7.3.3, which is the update on the dual enrollment. Cheryl.
Okay, it's me again. All right, so as we discussed before, we are pioneering sort of new territory with how to run the CCAP classes in our high schools here in Ojai Unified in this partnership, this potential partnership with VCCD. So the most recent conversation that's happened between Tim Harrison and I is in regard to how to compensate teachers for their time. So we looked at, he had a counterpart in Santa Barbara, I think I shared with you last time, that he communicated with Santa Barbara to find out about how much they were paying teachers. And then I had some conversations with Andy as well as Manuela and Lisa. I chose Manuela and Lisa because they're the ones that we've gone to ask if they might be willing to be the first pilot teachers in some foreign language classes in the spring. And so they already sort of had their head in the game. We're thinking about what it might take to take this on. So I thought it would be good to ask them how they felt about some of these proposals that I had for the stipends. There's, again, 2 different types of teaching situation. There's the potential for a college teacher or college professor to come over to the campus and co-teach with one of our teachers, which would be a little bit different. There'd be a little less requirement among our teachers because they wouldn't have to enter grades at the end of the semester. There'd be some tasks they don't have to do. So we saw a need to kind of differentiate between those 2 compensation amounts for a teacher that might be hired by Ventura College to teach individually the course. So both Manuela and Lisa and Angie, who I also spoke to, agreed that it seemed fair to pay about $1,000 as a stipend to a teacher for a course who was teaching individually on their own and then was responsible for some upfront work, making sure that their curriculum aligns with what the expectations are at the college, and then $500 for a teacher who is in that partnership, sort of that 2 teachers teaching together situation. as I was talking to Tim, we also talked about some sort of amount to come back to the district to offset the fact that we are still paying the teacher for that section. It's our section, and there's salary and benefits that we pay. So then an amount to come back to the district as well in the amount of about $2,000. He sort of reminded me as we were discussing that it might depend on the unit. So to figure out kind of an amount that we might come to if it were a 3-unit class or a 4-unit class or a 5-unit class. He kind of shared perhaps the idea of giving $1,000 per unit to the district, and then we can then pay out through our stipend process to the teacher the amount that we've agreed upon here. These are all just still sort of proposals. Tim has to take it back to his administrative team and union representatives, and then from here we'll move forward based on how they come back. But I felt really good about the conversations. It's been neat to see how this comes together, because again, it's just so brand new, and these conversations are just back and forth to figure out what we think is going to be the best arrangement and the most fair agreement for everybody. So that's where we're at.
So we are asking you today to approve the actual initial agreement. What Cheryl just updated you on would be included in an addendum, which would be an addition separate from the underlying agreement. This agreement is the model that was used for both, or pulled from San Paulo and Fillmore. And so what we want to do is have this in place tonight, because Tim would like it to be brought to, I believe, the next CCD board meeting. Always have to make sure I have the right number of C's, which I believe takes place next Tuesday.
Yeah, it's next Tuesday.
And so, we said we'd bring it to you guys tonight. Our hope is that we have this agreement in place. And this agreement, again, allows us to, and is the model used in the other districts, to have that team teaching situation. So the addendum and what we're still trying to work through is the situation where we have our own staff member teach the class individually, both for BC and us. And so we felt that we can, we have really positive conversations between Cheryl and Tim taking place right now. And so we really wanted to get this initial agreement approved by you guys, with the understanding that we're going to continue to work on the addendum. But our goal is still really working hard on trying to have either one of those two classes, or potentially, as we've previously discussed as well, a potentially CTE offering in that realm of graphic arts, graphic design, photography, something in that area as well. So in order for us to be able to stay on track with the goal of trying to have a class potentially offered as early as spring, we felt it was appropriate tonight for the approval.
So, I just want to be sure I understand this memo. I know that's not what we're voting on tonight, but I want to be sure I'm understanding it. So we're saying $1,000 to our instructor who's doing a dual enrollment by themselves.
Right.
And then an additional $2,000 to the district. So that's a total of $3,000. Then I go down to the paragraph, additional Dr. Harrison and I discussed. Is that more, or is that just a reframing of what's above? Because it talks about $3,000 for a 3-unit course.
Well, so when there is a 4-unit, it's a little bit more, because when there's a 4-unit course and a 5-unit course, we're talking about a little bit higher payment potentially to the district. And then we can still do the stipend amount that we, agree upon internally. So it might be that, since it's,
But it's a rephrasing of what the scenario of a 3-unit course would look like.
Okay.
So it's not an additional 3,000. If it's a 3-unit
Right.
course,
So
then it's
course
that.
is 1,000 to the teacher
Exactly,
and
but
2,000 to
but
us.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
Precisely.
All right.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
I had the same question this morning.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I don't do math, but
And as we think about these potential, the potential compensation for the teacher, what I'm not clear of is what, are we paying the teacher because the teacher is doing extra work? Or what would the teacher be expected to do without this being on their plate?
Without the CCAP course?
A teacher presumably has some full panoply of duties as a teacher of ours at Nordoff.
It's
So
Spanish too. It's just whether
Right.
are you getting college credit for this Spanish too.
Right.
Right, so they're
Right, so you
teaching
just-
the same course.
They're just having to do extra work to
There's a-
sort of upgrade their curriculum and change their.
Well, up front, they
Right.
have to actually look at the expectations for the course at VC and align their course to make sure that they're covering the content.
Right.
And then, so that takes some time.
Sure.
And then on the tail end, they're gonna have to learn the grading program and enter grades for the college. And so there's some work to be done on the tail end as well.
So they'll be entering grades both in our own grade book
Yeah.
system for Nordoff, but also VC.
Right.
I guess it's the code teacher really that comes to mind more. I'm not really sure how that is gonna work.
So, well, they're gonna have to
What would that
collaborate.
teacher have been doing otherwise, is my idea.
Our
That
teacher
teacher-
here?
Yeah, because that teacher wasn't, in the co-teaching scenario, the teacher wasn't already teaching this class, right?
No,
That
potentially
teacher's-
they might already be teaching the class, and the second teacher comes in, but again, they're gonna have to sit down and collaborate and talk and align the coursework so that they're in sequence, and especially because the second teacher coming from the college might only come out, let's say, 3 days of the week, where the class meets 4 days of the week, so the teacher's gonna need to make sure, our teacher's gonna need to make sure that they're in sync, so that on that fourth day when they're by themselves, potentially the double period day, I don't know, they're doing things that are in lock and step with what's going to happen on Monday when that teacher's back in the classroom and helping. So there's some collaboration time and some alignment that's going to have to happen that, it's going to take hours of work to do that.
But how does this, has this been vetted with the union? And I mean, I'm just wondering, like, if we ask a Nordoff teacher to teach something new, or hey, do something different, isn't there some similarity there? And are we compensating the Nordoff teachers who otherwise have to do those kinds of things in the regular course of Nordoff? I guess my question is, what does the union think about it? What do the union think about whether, how we compensate, and is it consistent? Is it fair?
Mm-hmm.
Is it different than what somebody else is doing?
Specifically with the CCAP agreements?
Well, other
I
teachers
guess I'm-
that, when they get new curriculum, new textbook, when you get a new textbook, that's gonna be additional work.
Mhm.
Do we give them a stipend for that? I'm just
No,
wondering how
but
the union thinks of this, is the bottom line.
I guess the only thing I can say is that I've had conversations with Angie, and she was in favor of it. Didn't have any major concerns. I know that it's been shared with the Nordoff staff. We haven't heard any concerns come forward. In communication with Lisa and Manuela, they have lots of questions, but they're excited about it. It seems like a great opportunity to offer students. So I haven't heard any major concerns where I could answer your question to say, well, the union feels this way about it or that way about it. But I can tell you that I've had discussions, and it doesn't seem like there's any major concern at this point. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
not following your question.
you're looking at me like it's an odd question, but from my
Maybe I just
perspective,
don't understand it.
we have full-time teachers.
Yeah.
And they are expected to commit themselves full-time to the endeavor of being a teacher at Nordoff. And
Mhm.
if they end up as part of that full-time, work,
Mhm.
doing something different,
Mhm.
and then we start saying, well, we're gonna give you extra money for that, I just wonder if that's a precedent that's appropriate. And I am interested in because my understanding is that the union has significant concerns about this whole project, I thought, but maybe
Mhm.
not. I thought, wasn't there some concern about the idea of potentially, having these small classes, or I don't remember what the issue was, but.
As long as we don't knock any teachers out, by
Right.
bringing in those classes, as long as none of our teachers lose their jobs.
Yeah, I don't think
I
that
think
was
that
the
was-
issue.
No?
That's the
Well-
concern I knew of.
Okay.
That's the one
And that's part of the agreement that we can't let that happen.
right.
Well, I think there is also, just as we've heard from the union in years past, a desire to potentially have a floor on classes, that you have a minimum number of students in the class to make sure it's viable. That there has been concern expressed, although I wouldn't necessarily, I would say maybe caution is the right word as opposed to extreme concern. Caution that one of these classes, would be under-enrolled and would be potentially taking money away from other endeavors that could support certificate staff. From VC standpoint, or at least from Dr. Harrison, I believe that they've told us that really they're looking at 25 being probably their floor, and that they're really looking for a class ideally in the 30s to be able to have it be financially viable for them. So I don't think we have the situation where, like this year, where we've had, unfortunately, because of master schedule conflicts, classes that are in the teens or in below 20, that wouldn't be a situation that would impact this. We wouldn't.
So to go back to Kevin's question about essentially what are we paying for, if I'm understanding your question. I understand the process because I'm not conversant at all on actually how it works with the teachers. But the way I understand it, we're paying, say, $50 an hour or whatever, you know, 20 hours worth of extra pay, because CCAP teachers have to deal with an external entity. Basically line up with Ventura, make sure it meets their standards, make sure they're covering their student learning objectives.
Right.
And all that kind of stuff, which is an additional accountability that folks who are not doing CCAP classes don't actually have to do.
Right.
Okay.
Right, so
Yeah.
you're saying that teachers might start demanding what the other teacher again.
Yeah, I think it's important we articulate, as Mike just has, what's going on here, because it sounded to me like we were just sort of saying, hey, you know, it's a new thing, so let's give them some extra money, which is great. I'm not opposing it, but let's be clear about what we're doing. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me that if you're actually having to interact with a completely separate entity in a different and more probably consistent way and requiring, you know, whatever additional record keeping stuff, it makes sense to me. But
Right.
I do think in the incredibly constrained resource environment we are in, particularly with our teachers, we need to be very careful about articulating reasons why we give some teachers more money, period.
Yeah, it's fair.
Fair, yep.
Any other questions before we have a motion?
Just one last question. The site liaison, is that is that a specific role that's not a teacher?
Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified that. So that's already been in existence because they used to offer some college courses on Nordoff's campus, so he just recommended we keep that the same, which is that there needs to be a person on the campus, typically it's been a counselor, that helps with the paperwork process.
Okay.
So helping the students get enrolled, I think there's some things parents have to sign, so coordinating that stuff, and that's what the liaison would do.
Point of contact for the district, the college district as well?
Yeah.
And I would hope in that is that they would help kids when they're applying to college get those transcripts and make sure they have the VC transcripts as well as the high school transcripts and.
Yeah, yeah. I think each counselor would definitely help make sure that that happened.
Okay.
And so there's a stipend
And
for that.
I did
Yeah.
notice on, in paragraph 11,
Mm-hmm.
here's a typo, I mean, it's not a big deal, but. Third line down on the right side, tortuous. It says tortuous.
No.
It's not torture.
Could be appropriate too.
I would
We'll
be
correct it.
worried.
I focus on those indemnifications, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve this, agreement between OI Unified School District and Ventura Community College District.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? None. Thank you. 7.4.1, Andy, good thing you're here, we finally have something for you.
That's right.
Approval, authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds. Actually, I was gonna ask, Shelley, you're the only one who wasn't here. We have actually, as a board, done this already for the first round of bond Series A. So I'm not sure that there's a ton of questions, and if we need a discussion, or if we just wanna have an action.
My only, I'm sure it's well thought out, I just wondered how you came to the 17.
That was what was actually in the initial plan back in 2014, was that we'd sell the Series A in the spring of 2015, Series B in this amount in 2017. And I believe that the Series C, the final portion, would be sold in either 19 or 20.
What's
But
that last one is 8 mil?
yeah, exactly. It's that remaining amount. And so I believe back in 2014, when that was included as part of the discussion, was the focus on the assessed values and what the property values in the county could, or in the community would support at a $35 per parcel cap. And so that's really what they're aiming, that the amount that'd be assessed is in that low 30s. This year, I believe it was $31. But that was the rationale for how they came up with.
My only concern with the number, well, and it's not to exceed, so you don't have to do it all, but we've been working slower than we actually anticipated, and we may not need all of this money as quickly as we thought we were going to need it all. It's obviously a trade-off, because interest rates probably aren't going down.
Right.
So it's good to get the rates while we can. But on the other hand, it doesn't make sense for the citizens of the valley to pay interest on money that's just sitting there and we're not using.
That's a great point. So I think you provide the answer I'd provide in your initial statement, though. You know, that was certainly feedback I provided to John Isom, who helped us back in 2014 as well. And his concern was certainly interest rates, you know, that by delaying a year or more, or simply going out for 12 million and having a different amount be sought in the third round, that the difference in interest rates could be such that we're harming the the community, the valley, by holding off. And so interest rates are at, still near record lows. We believe that right now, given the fiscal position of our district, that this is one of the best times we can be going out. We know that we're going to start drawing down on our reserve balance. Right now, we have the largest reserve balance that we've had in over a decade.
Our rating.
For our rating, exactly. So our rating will impact, obviously, what the interest rate is on the debt. So the fact that
That's
this is
actually true.
the fact that we're in a good environment, as far as bond environment. There's also a lot of concern as far as what the current Republican proposal on tax or the tax plan, the impact it will have on municipal bonds and tax exempt bonds. And so they actually told me that when I was on a call with them earlier today, that there's going to be an anticipated rush in December for people trying to get in 2017 rather than have this even delayed by a year, because they believe that that's going to impact rates as well. So ultimately, I think both given our fiscal condition right now.
Let me interrupt. Call your congressman and your senator
Yeah.
to oppose the current tax plan.
I don't think I've seen any commentary that would impact municipal bonds, so that sounds like an unnecessary scare.
Well, I don't know you would be the most qualified, I think, to probably weigh in on that, but I'm not sure the extent to which the media really focuses on.
I haven't read the 400-page document.
I don't know the extent to which media focus on things that impact muni bonds and their treatment. So I do think, I think that both from an interest environment, this is a good time for us to go out. I think the fact that we made that commitment initially, and it helps us maintain a continuity of that low $30 price point, as opposed to if we go out for something lower, it will end up causing us to dip into only having a $27, $28 assessed value, which it seems minimal, but what, again, John, who does this with 100 districts at a time, says the outcry that the community will have when they start seeing perceived increases, that you just avoid the headache by having it be a continuity of a rate, as opposed to even though it was a savings in that year or two where it went down, their perceptions when it goes back up by $10 and now all of a sudden they're being taken. But then I'd say also just the initial premise of we've been slow out the gates, I of course have to agree with. I do think though that we are in a much better place now than we were the past 2.5 years, and so I believe that we will be ramping up, and that's very reasonable for us to project to spend $6 to $8 million a summer or a year for the next 4 to 5 years. I think that we are on track to spend that money.
Well, and so this is one of my questions, because we've been talking previously about, okay, we sold the bonds and we're
Right.
under a timeline to
Right.
get that money committed.
Right.
And we're pushing,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, we're pushing up against it right
Right.
now. So are you saying that, because that timeline was not a long timeline, that was like
3 years from time of sale.
from the time of sale, all right?
Right.
And so, am I hearing you correctly that you believe that we will not face the same kind of time pressure in the next 3 years with the money that we're generating, that we're facing now? Because I don't really think it's the best process, right?
Mhm.
To come up with 36 months and be like, we got 3 months to make decisions.
So,
Right.
no, I'm certain that we will not be 36 months from now in that still decision-making mode. I think that we are in the decision-making mode for the next few months, next 6 months. Really, that document that we presented to you guys last month is the goal for getting us to a point where we don't have a lot of fluctuation. It's more of, in this spring of 2018, I would believe that we have our entire $35 million planned out, and a sequence of timing of those projects. And so we will not be in place 2 or 3 years from now that we've been for the past few years, of where we are having to make some of these decisions now because we just haven't had the planning done up to this point. The planning, we are in a good place right now with the planning, and we'll be near complete soon. So, but you're absolutely correct as far as the timeline and the reality that we will, in our planning, we will have to make sure that we are spending that $6 to $7, $8 million a year, which we all know, again, that $100 million need is present today. So the lack of spending has not been the lack of projects; it's been the lack of coordination and planning, and so we're getting there.
Good, okay, thank you.
I have a couple. How was Raymond James chosen?
I don't know the process of how we selected them initially. This is the exact same bond team that we used for the first sale.
And so it's just in the same terms, I think it says, Thane, you're more conversant in this than me, but they can charge up to 0.650.
Correct.
So give or take, they're gonna be paid about $150,000, or I don't know what the math is, 35 million, 0.650 of that, right? That's what they're gonna make,
Right, I believe it's.
more than that?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. You're right in that general.
I mean, that's how they get paid. They get
Right.
paid by being able to
Right.
buy them at a discount.
And sell them.
Right.
There are two different, I mean,
And my
I've
other
actually-
question while we're looking at that is how do we compensate ISOM? I just want to be reminded of that. I know that hasn't come before the board, but does he have any, do they have any incentive to, do they get paid when we issue bonds as opposed to just on an hourly basis for just providing services, or how does that work?
No, he gets paid at issuance as well. So.
So he'd have an incentive to tell us to issue the bonds, obviously, right? Because he's gonna get paid for that.
Sure. Sure.
yeah, so he's in the financial advisor role, and then Raymond James is in the underwriter role.
And how does he get paid, ISOM's firm?
He would get paid out of the distribution of the bonds.
But I mean, is that a part of a contract?
I have forgotten, I've forgotten, it should be in here,
I didn't see it, I looked.
what the,
I saw no reference to ISOM in there.
yeah, I know I saw it before, but I did not read all of it. I went through it, but I didn't read carefully.
Yeah, did you know?
It's coming out of the 0.65, so we don't have
Okay.
a separate check issued to ISOM. It's part of the distribution.
So he and the underwriter split that.
Which,
And Jones Hall, the
Bond counsel.
bond counsel,
Right.
exactly.
yeah. Jones Hall has always been one of the biggest in municipal bonds. I used to work with them. But it's been a lot of years since I've been in the municipal bond business, so I think a lot of things has changed, and that brings up another question. I'm not sure what the current law is. What are we doing? Are we earning anything on the money we're sitting on?
Yeah, so we the first year we had the bonds in 2015, I believe it was about $75,000 interest we did earn. Since then, it's been reduced by, I believe, in 16 it was about 40,000. So that's the reason that's the whole reason that the IRS imposes that 3-year timeline to start spending the money, is they don't want us to have the arbitrage opportunity of this, this debt or this, revenue sitting in an account that we're able to start collecting untaxed earnings from the interest. So it is untaxed to us, but that's how they prevent us from being able to have it be a 10-year trust or longer by forcing us to spend down that money.
Yeah, I was really careful about reading these things when we first did it, but then, since then, it's just the distribution.
And
of
I
the money
relied
is
on
up.
you and Kevin to read it, so there you go.
Wow.
It's the same document
But
that you
yeah,
read back.
it's big. I
The
mean,
change
I
was
think-
Series A to Series B.
I think the only critical thing is the number, the 17.
Right.
Is the only difference between this and the 10 and the.
That's correct.
The remaining funds, but, yeah, I mean, that's my only concern is and I think Mike hit that point well too, is are we gonna be able to spend it as the right amount right now? They're gonna get all of our money, because we made the deal already on the 35, so it's just a question of when they get it.
What do they, remind me, what do they, we haven't decided the coupon rate, so to speak, right, yet?
That's a bid, so when we sell, that's what the underwriter does.
Right.
They go out and they resell it on the street and they get their,
Yeah.
But, I mean,
I mean,
but-
just as,
exactly
yeah,
correct.
go
But
ahead.
just,
Yeah.
since you've done this, so
Yeah.
as it stands, I was just, Jem and I were just talking about it, so it's
Right.
perfect, and I gave him all sorts of.
That's kind
wrong
of a
information.
fireside chat, I know.
I just tell him stuff
Let
and
the
he goes to
community
bed going like,
decide.
that doesn't make any sense, just shut up and go to bed.
Life doesn't make sense.
No, but, you know, I was, a bond, you know, I described it like, you know, it actually has an interest rate attached to it.
Yeah.
And then we talked about the aftermarket, as the interest rates fluctuate, then you might pay less or more than the face value of the bond based on the interest. But, so the face value of the bond is determined by the underwriter?
Well, the underwriter and who they're selling it to.
Right.
So basically, you get on the phone with Wall Street firms and you say, hey, how much will you pay me for the Ohio Unified School District bond?
Right.
And so you get somebody who gives you quotes. I was a kid, I was in my early 20s when I started doing this, and I couldn't believe, you know, we'd get on the phone and we'd make a deal for, you know, $100 million on the phone.
And go to lunch.
And it's
yeah.
like, exactly.
But it's
Yeah.
like a Dutch auction in the sense that the underwriter is looking to sell the 35 million, and what interest will have to offer in order to sell it all.
And they sell it by year. So for example, somebody might be willing to pay one rate for the ones that expire in 2025,
Right.
but a different rate in 2030.
Right.
Might go up and down depending on what the current market is. So you have the amount per year, and then you sell it by year.
That sounds sophisticated. You know where I'm coming from with the stuff. I was just thinking if Ron Tyndall could do it, so. Sounds too, yeah, you know what? We'll get an underwriter. I mean, I wanna save us money, but we'll get an underwriter.
That's wise.
As long as you have friends with a lot of money, you can.
No, I didn't even know you were here.
That's right.
Did you just hear that whole thing? Yeah, that's so funny. I didn't know you were there.
I thought you said it because.
Yeah.
No, I didn't even see him there.
I thought you made up the whole
Right.
thing just because he walked in.
But you negotiate a little bit too when you're the
Yeah,
underwriter
yeah.
and you try to get a good deal. So.
So do we have a motion to authorize the issuance of this $17 million bond?
I'll move.
I'll
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. We have, the Measure J updates are just here, and you read them, and we're
Yeah.
gonna move on.
Thank you.
There's nothing important. Second reading of the CSBA policies, tonight is the action to approve those. Revisions, did anyone have a question on those, or shall we just, I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. Okay, 7.5.2, board discussion of officer rotation, nominating process, location of meetings, and student rep roles. I know everyone's going, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? This is kind of my I brought this up. So one of the things that, Thane, you're the only other person on the board besides myself who has yet served as a president. And I'm about at the end of my year, I was really surprised at the extra amount of work that it takes.
It's shocking, really.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
it's a whole different ballgame.
I felt it was kind of important to say that because the next three people who are supposedly in line for this are, in jobs that are a little more time commitment than you and I, you kind of, contracting and making my own hours as a bookkeeper. So I wanted to make you guys aware of it and also make you aware of possible ways we could tweak it, so that we're not addressing it when it's like, oh my God, I'm up for a vote, and that you have some knowledge and that you're coming in with the information. So in addition to the monthly meeting, you would have 2 additional meetings. You'd have an agenda prep, which you guys do maybe twice a year, and then you'd have the morning of the meeting. You have
Or not. By the way, I missed mine.
And then there's also, just times when Andy or Cheryl might have a specific question about whether something comes to the board or the first time you hear of something, and so there's those extra phone calls and possible meetings.
And public stuff and city stuff that is directed at the president or press or whatever.
Right, press, you might get a few
Writing
more
that
emails,
letter
those kind of things. So my thought was not only the possibility of someone saying, I don't think my job will, as much as I'd like to serve or deserve to serve, I don't know that I can. Or if we can find a way to say, if that comes up in the future, that it's with the knowledge of the vice president knowing, you know what, let's say it was me and saying, this is a busy month for me at work. I don't think I can run this meeting. I'll come to the meeting, but I don't know that I have the extra time to prepare for it. That we have it's almost like co-presidents, but officially it's not, that a vice president might be able to say, well, I can run that meeting, or,
It is interesting that the other officers on the board really don't do anything other than sign the
I
documents.
sign stuff.
I know, well, you do that remarkably well, but, yeah. I mean, there is an opportunity to have other officers do more, perhaps. I don't know how that would work, but.
Well, I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, we haven't taken advantage of that, but it certainly seems like something that should be taken advantage of when it's appropriate.
Right, and I think in the past it's been, that person's not gonna be here, so the vice president will run it. But I think it's perfectly okay to say, I'm not gonna be able to do the pre-agenda meeting or this or that, and so, somebody else run the meeting if we want. Or I just felt like it was important to sort of let you know, you would be up next, that it's a significant increase in
Right.
duties.
Well, it's something that I've thought about because, I have trouble getting here from Camarillo, and that coming back and forth in the middle of the day kills my day. I've looked at the rotation, it's possible I might come up, and president would be a challenge for me. The time commitment would be difficult.
Right.
When you say it's possible you might come out, are you expecting end days, or
Well,
you're
you
just?
never know.
He is up for election next
Oh, that's-
November. Re-election. If
We
he
might
decides to
be
run.
here in 2 years, it's possible.
On the other hand, I like what you're saying about parsing the work out. So if it's not something that I have to drive here for, I can take on something, right?
Right.
It's just that I'm tied to a clock.
Right.
I think, where my current thinking has been that, when my time comes, I may have to waive that opportunity, because of right now the time requirements. So between that and the other committees, even that's a nominal, but it all adds up.
Right.
So it gets challenging for me.
Yeah, in a similar vein, I mean, I very much actually do look forward to being president, because I think it will be,
He's always
I think
wanted to
it'll
hold
be
the gavel.
Yeah, it's here.
a different kind of experience on the board. But the reality is that you know how it is with my job, it's long periods of total availability punctuated by occasional just complete unavailability. And, I could potentially have a trial this coming spring, and if I do, I will definitely be taking advantage of the vice president option, I'm sure, because, if I'm in trial, I will be up to my eyeballs for weeks on end.
But theoretically, that's what a VP is for,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the role, whether it's job sharing, so to speak, or relief, I mean, either
Or
way.
just a guy from Indiana who just smiles.
Are you from Indiana?
No.
I'm talking about Pence.
Oh, sorry, I didn't make that leap. Okay, so that was just why I wanted it here, so that we had the opportunity to say, hey, we work together. I mean, obviously, I don't think, except for these meetings, that there's ever been ever a sense that any position is, more important than another, so. That was that, and then in terms of the student rep, when I first came on the board, I was reading our board policies, and one of the things that it states a student rep does from the high school is actually represent the student body. So that when we have issues about, later start times, or test scores, or making math, math 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of algebra, that there is somebody that gets the word out to students at Nordhoff that this is something we're discussing, and gets opinions. And we are not using the person that way, and I sure as heck would like to start using the person that way.
I think it'd be interesting to have more than I love the reporting, because, we don't nearly hear enough what all is happening out there, but I like that idea. I know at work, our student trustee actually votes, sits in the entire meeting and does advisory voting to essentially the voice of the students.
Right.
So I think it's very valuable if the students do. I think it would be an opportunity.
Now, obviously, the time commitment is a lot more than the current student just reads something and leaves, so they're gone within 10 minutes. So if this is a 3-hour commitment once a month, that is different.
I think that's a lot to ask, and one of my concerns is the representative that we have is not elected by the student body.
But I'm asking for that to change.
So that would be part of that, so they would hold elections.
They have a student government, right? Don't they make
It's a
elections?
leadership class.
No, I mean, you don't have presidents of the class, gentlemen?
They don't do any of that.
You don't have any kind of student
They don't do
government?
any
Really?
student government.
That's
honestly
actually-
don't-
Oh, they don't do that
The most
anymore?
democratic
No.
type of election is our homecoming king and queen.
Yeah, they don't do any of that, is what I'm saying, is
You don't have freshman president, sophomore
No.
president of the class?
Really?
no ASB class.
They used
When
to.
I was in high school, I,
This is princess and princesses and
Yeah.
king and
Yeah.
It's
queen.
a fairy, it's fairy
We could have a
tale,
queen.
we like to
I
structure
think it would
around
be-
fairy tale sort of fantasia.
I think it would be a great
Huh,
thing to bring back, honestly. I don't know
Along
where
with
it went,
civics
because I
class?
have several relatives who were the class presidents at Nordhoff, so at some point it disappeared, I don't know why. But
I
My
thought this
memory
last
is
year, I
ASB
thought that
president.
she was,
Who's-
what's her name, was
she's from
ASB?
the leadership class, and the leadership class votes on who their
Right, so it's-
representative
it's
would
like,
be.
it's like having a
You s-
specialized board that somehow they have the jurisdiction to elect, you know, the ASB
Yeah.
class it elects the president, so it's not.
You
it's not-
sign up for the leadership class, and in that class they
think
vote
it's
on
like North
something, so it's
Korea.
not. And, you know, one of the
I gotta
things-
tell you, I'm not sitting on this board, this is the first I've heard of that. I thought that they had a senior class president, and I thought they had a ASB president, and I don't understand why they don't.
Cheryl and I did as well, so
I
we
thought
will.
so too, and they
So
did
we'll
when
look
I
into
was
it.
there,
Pretty
so
sure
I don't
they
know what
don't.
changed
No,
or when.
Jim seems to.
Yeah.
Unless I'm completely oblivious,
No, I'm
I'm confident you guys
backing
are
you
right.
onto this, Jem, and
We'll check
one
into
of the
it.
things that I remember doing in that ASB role in high school is we held a day-long convention where you had to get up and do your stump speeches, and you had
Oh,
to,
wow.
you know, it mirrored our election process that I think is so important if we want our student body to participate in that, to understand what a convention is. Why do we have these things? So I would love to see it come back. I don't know why it was scrapped.
And we could manage
I'll
the
look into
time
it.
commitment, I mean, we could structure it any way we want. The student doesn't have to sit there listening to us go on and on and on.
Right.
They get the agenda in advance, they can do their activity reporting, and then make their sort of commentary on the agenda items.
Or we could
Yeah,
move those,
relevant.
sort of like, hey, tonight we're gonna do 8.3
move 'em up,
first,
yeah.
so that we have, because we would like to have the student vote or the student, vocal.
Right.
Obviously, the bond issue, those kind of things, they don't need to be here for. But I think some of the other reporting we did tonight would have been interesting to see,
It would have been
about.
interesting to hear the students' take on the scores.
Right.
I've never been fully satisfied with the role. I don't, to me, again, like everybody said, I love the reporting. But I would like to have the student bring up issues. What are the students unhappy about? What
Yeah,
can the
name
school board do to
names.
fix it? Exactly. And then, it's the experience of it. To be a student and to be able to sit on a, public body and participate, I think
Well,
there's a lot of learning. that
And I
can
would
go in.
also argue even before that, running an election campaign at a
all of that.
school,
Right.
I think is
It's great on the
incredibly
resume.
valuable. I
Right,
did
college
it in high school, I
applications.
lost, I learned how to lose.
Yeah.
And came back and lost again, you know?
But then you
why they
learn,
don't?
so-
I don't. I know
So-
that at least 2 years ago, they had an ASB president. I don't think there are underclass presidents. that I recall, but I know there was an ASB president.
But I think that comes out of the leadership class. I don't
Not
think
the
it's
whole
a student body-wide vote.
I'm
So how do
surprised.
we,
I could be wrong, but that's
Yeah.
my understanding.
Well, if students don't want, if nobody wants to participate on the school board, then.
Well, and that is
you know,
a
fair
reality.
enough.
The challenge that we've had is actually a different, last week didn't have anyone, and we've had now 4 folks, it's been a different person every month, so.
But are they alternating because none of them wanna come, or are they alternating because all of them wanna come?
Because of priorities.
Right, so.
Yeah, I think it's the
volleyball and
former.
this or that,
Uh,
yeah. But it's different if you're asking someone, if you know as a student that you're running for this position to be elected, it's a very different, it's like, your mock trial group, it's a very different commitment, and I think you're gonna get somebody, we lucked out with Jennifer last year, really, that commitment that she made to it, but that was the that's why she was Miss Nordoff, or whatever she was, at
Right.
graduation, it was.
So I hate to bring up my own experiences because I feel like it reminds people of how young I am. But I was class president all 4 years. I ran elections. I was also student body president and won that election. But being
See, that's why you're where you are, and I'm where I lost mine.
being senior class president at Moore Park High School meant that you were the student rep on the school board meetings, and I went to 2 meetings a month because in Moore Park they have 2, not 1. And I was there throughout the entire year. Now, I think I may have gotten like $1,000 scholarship from Rotary or Kiwanis or someone who sponsored the, scholarship for the school board student rep. And that could be something that I could talk to Rotary or one of the service or OEF or someone to see if that could also be one additional incentive to have students interested. But I do agree that as we talk about the whole process of an election and of it really being an honorable position, that we might be able to get a student who. But going back to my experience, I did stay, throughout the entire time, and I was able to weigh in and give, my 18-year-old thoughts on various.
And you voted?
We voted, but it was advisory, so of course it wasn't actually a binding vote. It wasn't something that, made 6 votes for the board, but it was something that I was able to weigh in on.
Now tell us, did they say, and what do you vote, Andy?
I'm sure
Go
it was.
ahead, Andy, vote.
Yeah, it probably was that.
I like the advisory vote idea a lot. I think that's great to get input. I'm troubled with the real vote because
Of course.
there's democracy and,
Yeah.
Because we fight a lot.
We do, yeah. There's so many, 2, 3 votes that could go either way.
I wonder though if also, while we're thinking about this, if maybe a different direction would be to open it to maybe, every other, maybe an elementary school version of this, a middle school version, and a high school version, that you would have a student who's a representative of the elementary schools, and that we would orient the meeting in some minor way towards at least hearing about issues that this student has been able to glean. Because if you think about a meeting, it sounds generically like, the high school student would have opinions. Are they gonna have an opinion about ISOM and whether or not we should go at, 0.65% for the bond and get 17 million?
That's
No,
why
they're
I
not
was
gonna have a
saying it
clue,
would be-
So it's not all that often that we have broad issues before the board that kind of broadly would be of interest to a student. But instead, I think we should consider inviting students to come. And then if we're gonna do that, I wonder, 1, it's less of a time commitment, and 2, we get a broader diversity of opinion from the different schools if we said, okay, today we'll hear from the high school, tomorrow, next month we'll hear from middle school, next month we'll hear from elementary school. I do think it would be very interesting, like on a night like tonight, just to hear more on the ground perspectives. Not that it's an end all be all, but it's always in the moment, when there's a student here and there's principals are here and everything, that's the moment when it really is interesting, because we can all hear from our kids or other people, but when it's in the environment and there can actually be a response, that's.
I think the only issue I would be concerned about is students, we have, as adults, we have certain, we know how to say something without it being, I don't know, like, so, let me say,
Offensive or-
well, I'm just saying, it's like, if I, as a student, have a trouble with a particular teacher, you know, and I come in and I wanna say, you know, this geometry, you know, math teacher is really bad, I don't think that's the way, I just said that because we don't have any geometry teachers anymore, as my understanding of it anyway. You know, it's so, it would, I don't want it to take time from our staff, administration to sort of like be pre-meeting with kids or, you know, I think it could
Yeah.
tie in with,
Yeah.
you know, this other topic of going to different sites. But I think too much of that would be, because you'd be training different kids throughout, whereas you have an elected who already is a student body president, who understands those issues, they're already going to the principal, hopefully, and having those kind of discussions where, hey, we really feel like, you know, AP auto shop is something that's gotta happen, or whatever, so, I'd have concerns about too much of.
Well, hopefully we'd be modeling good behavior, and that would be what they'd be learning as part of the experience, and how to
But I think
communicate.
elementary school's a bit young to be,
Yeah.
I,
I mean, I love the idea, I mean, like, I remember in elementary school, we had president, student body president elections, and, you know, it was less homework and more, you know, desserts for lunch or whatever it was. And, you know, that would be interesting to hear. But yeah, as far as sitting here and contributing to the discussion, it'd be hard. But I love what you say about saying things in a diplomatic way. But that's not really necessary in politics, right? We happen to be nice.
Well, I think, Kevin, maybe that idea could come into the, you know, if we do, our other topic tonight is to discuss rotating meeting locations. So it might, and, you know, it might be, well,
Yeah,
hey, we're
exactly.
going to be at Topa
Yeah,
Topa next
yeah.
week, so,
Yeah.
or next month.
Yeah.
So let's have a student or two join us.
Well, I like the idea of getting more than just the activity reports, however we structure it, and clearly it's probably something we wanna go into slowly so that, you know, they can figure out what they wanna do with it, the students themselves. But I like that idea of, what are you guys thinking, not just, you know, we had our bake-off and we had this and we had that. And-
which comes from the principals largely, those reports.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't write them. So Cheryl or Andy, how do we move forward on this idea? What would be the first step?
We'll take it. We'll speak with Dave as well as Bronwyn, and first of all, understand what's currently taking place at Nordoff, because we've been surprised tonight. But also, we will see from them how they believe we can best go about, you know, I hear very clearly what your objectives are, what you believe, how we could improve functioning of, you know, their contributions, and we'll work on that and come back to you.
I could even imagine, I think there's some benefit to the reading of the things going on, because obviously there are a couple people watching on TV or whatever, or some people in the audience, but if we could get a fuller version, if that could be the executive summary, and we, as the board members, get a fuller version that we could read, I think that then you would free up some time for some more, you know, whether it becomes a report or if it's somebody who really, unfortunately, I feel like apathy is such a problem these days that we may be optimistic to think that we would find someone who's really interested in sitting in on our meeting. But I agree, I think having some real interaction as opposed to just, let me read, you know, a list of things going on in the district, I think would be great. And, you know, it's once a month, so you can certainly imagine somebody being able to come up with, you know, something that they think is worthy of discussing with us every month. And I agree, it would be great to hear from, I mean, my gosh, you know, this is all about students and we don't hear from them enough.
And it's an opportunity to, I mean, they're the future, right? I mean, they're gonna be running for office and serving, you know, it'd be good for them, for somebody who's interested to get some experience. Maybe they learn, oh, this is terrible, I would never wanna do this, but maybe they learn, hey, this is great, I wanna do this.
Hey, I met with the Boy Scouts once, and they were like, what's the prerequisite? And I said, you have to be 18. That's the only thing, right? So if you have somebody served here, I mean, maybe we have future board members.
Maybe it's a bad idea, because that's more people running against us.
Free water.
There you go.
Well, it's
Free
not
water.
free, it's coming up from somewhere,
Yeah.
our general fund. Okay, Kevin, you wanted to talk about rotating meeting locations, possibly?
I think I think you guys have heard me say it before, I always thought it might be interesting to have an element of our yearly program involve kind of a circuit court notion of going to cafeteria and having a school board meeting at the different schools. I think we could begin such a meeting with a little brief tour with anyone who wanted to go, you know, a 15-20 minute thing, and just kind of reacquaint ourselves as a board, because as individuals, we have lots of experience around the district, but with the different schools. And, you know, it would be a long-term project. I wouldn't expect you wouldn't want to do all of the schools in a year, or even, you know, we couldn't do it, but, you know, maybe 3 or something, so 3 meetings a year, or even 2. Just kind of rotate, and what I think could happen is you, in each case, might get some people to show up because it's their school, and then that might actually build a constituency of people that in the future actually start being more engaged with the school board because they finally went to a meeting for a particular reason, and then they realize, hey, there's a lot going on there that I should be interested in.
Yeah, I would be concerned about doing it, like, trying to do 8 schools,
Yeah.
you know, because people who do come, or who do have something to come, are gonna assume it's here. And then they would be like, wait, where is it this month? It'll be a little hard to keep
Right.
track of, but.
Well, we can tell Chuck.
Yeah,
Well,
because
and
there
do
is
we-
the administrative overhead, you know,
Yeah.
of moving everything to a remote site
The
as well.
technology,
And
yeah.
the technology and.
Do we get our
and
comfy
everything.
chairs? Or do we have to have
Oh, yeah, I have to have.
Yeah,
folding
we'd have
chairs.
metal
I
folding
mean,
chairs.
and of course, there's just the psychological part of how utterly depressing it will be to be sitting at Topa Topa's auditorium, just us.
In hard metal.
In
Folding
an
chairs.
empty cavern with a vacuum cleaner off in the distance.
The door prize, you know.
And you guys going, Kevin, good idea.
But it would be so fun to see the new kitchen.
Well,
can all
I
work
am, I am not opposed to the idea.
And I think the way you kind of guarantee an audience is that
Like
you
PTA.
do, yeah, maybe you have the PTO or something, make, you know, some presentation that's specific to that school as
Right.
part of it.
Right.
So that you know,
Perhaps when they give their SIPSA plan for their site.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah, right, rather than doing it here, right.
Mm. Like it.
Yeah, the site plan time is good, although we usually group them together.
The elementary, yeah.
Right, I'm just saying that they could be left out because of that.
And do we have any idea of what the logistics would be of moving the video camera?
Andy?
and-
Dave Rogers told me it'd be less than a half hour of his time to set up, or of his team's time to set up the camera and our mics. We
Probably wouldn't be real-time broadcast.
which we
right?
haven't been doing
Yeah.
actually this year anyway. So that was
Once
one of the
again, I'm the
hurdles.
last to know.
That was one of the hurdles in the past, was the broadcasting on Channel 10. But I think a combination of scheduling conflicts with the city, as well as our desire to make sure that the edited version of the video, when I say edited, only the breaks that we take, of course, no other portion of it, but is done and posted on YouTube, and then we send it over to the city. So we can do that anywhere.
Yeah.
That has no impact to us. So it's very minimal. If we're gonna move around chairs and you know, some of the other logistics, it'd be, you know, more comfortable chairs. It'd be
No,
more.
we would
But
just sit there.
if it was the folding chairs at each site, yeah, it'd be.
There's
it would not
some,
be
I mean,
much.
like the libraries have nicer chairs, so you could bring in some library chairs or something, just ask.
We can make it work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Kevin, you
So-
get to figure out the first one.
I'm hearing general interest.
Yeah, we'll flip a coin.
Next month is the actual scheduling meeting for the year. So, in December is when we actually have our planning meeting, here we
Is
go.
our next vote.
Next time. So at that, we will bring to you, maybe a general concept of where in the year, knowing, when we have layoff discussions, probably is not going to be the right time to go to a school, or, when, based on the conversations that we know take place at various times of the year, when might be an appropriate time. We'll also, Cheryl and I will spend some time thinking about potential good first sites.
And I would argue that we need to do west side schools to start off with if we were picking schools. Only, I was in like the Wormwood neighborhood the other day and I thought, gosh, we all are east side. Like, I think we all live on the east end of
Four of us are
everything.
Topa parents.
That's my point, is we are not, I feel like less representative.
Right, I live
It would be
farthest
good.
west, right?
Yeah, it'd be good to move in that direction.
What is that school's name that's out there? I know there's some other schools that are
other.
west of Topa. What are they called?
They start with M's, they're all M.
Okay, 7.5.3, a action item to approve December 5th as the organizational meeting. Thank you, Michael. The clerk is calling for this meeting.
I slaved over this memo, I want you to know that.
Very well done.
I will make a motion to approve December 5th as the organizational meeting date. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Well, except it says December seventh.
Yeah, the memo will be corrected.
Okay.
The recommendation's correct.
You slaved.
You wanted, that's my birthday, December 7th, and I thought, you were doing that as a little joke.
Yeah. It's a tribute.
No
Wait,
better
so
way to spend your birthday.
December 5th is the correct date, and that's what the motion was for. If you look at the actual memo, the one sentence of that memo is December 7th.
I was looking over here, it says the 5th also.
Yep.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, we did have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. 7.5.4, superintendent's report.
Well, I just have two pretty brief comments. The first, I think Bill Miley's comments very well said as far as making sure, as a business person myself or on the business side of education, I'm staring at numbers all through the day, and Cheryl and I have been spending a lot of time recently staring at numbers when looking at the data points of these test scores, but I think it's very important, and I know you guys certainly do, but I want to make sure it's stated as well, that when we're talking about the numbers that we discussed throughout tonight, we are talking about children. We're talking about our neighbors, or in some cases our own children. And so, as Bill said, our target is 100%. Now, realistically, are we going to be there next year? Of course not. But I certainly am not satisfied at all by, vacillating between 30% and 40, or maybe being lucky and getting ourselves up to 50. Cheryl and I both see it as an absolute priority not to be educating to a test, but to have an education that is well-rounded, but includes the attributes that are being tested for into this new system as well. And so, I just want to state that we can get focused on looking at big aggregate data, but we obviously know that this is made up of individual kids in this valley, and we care deeply for their individual success. Other thing that I want to just mention is just how exciting it was for me to be in such a passive role tonight and see something that truly, it couldn't have existed for the past decade. And that's, a great credit to the board, I'd like to thank, for giving us this arrangement of a district leadership team. First of all, our principals, I love all of them, and it was exciting to see just, the extent to which there was nodding heads and excitement of, oh yeah, we're talking about that. And yes, I hope you guys sense that as well. There is a lot of excitement from the principals. But really, that's credit to Cheryl and the fact that we have this newly created position that, again, we really did not have a district office presence. Hank and I certainly were not doing that, previously, and Hank and Danny were not able to do that previously. Being able to really focus, days and days and weeks on pouring into this data and looking at the best, research on, data-driven, effective instructional practices. And so there is an excitement, certainly among the leadership team, with Cheryl's leadership and just her focus on this. And I think that you guys will continue to see what you got a taste of tonight, which is that the questions that you guys were all asking were excellent, and it's the same questions that they're asking as well, as far as, not being content with where we are now, but really trying to dive in and see how can we achieve more. And so, Cheryl, thank you very much for, I believe, a great job tonight, but, far more so the incredible work you've been doing since stepping into this role, and working with all of our leaders, many of whom are new to at least their site this year, if not to the role of principal. But there's exciting work right now that, we are focused on improving for the future. So to me, it was just a very fun evening.
Yeah, it was. I have to say too, to my fellow board members and Jane as president, also the environment, I think is really conducive to just people feeling comfortable to just engage, which is, unfortunately not all that common with boards like this.
True.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're having very exciting conversations. I wish you guys could be a fly on the wall but we're scrutinizing and looking through that information and really trying to determine what can be the best next steps, especially under the limited resources that we have. So there's exciting conversations happening, and you'll see more.
I'd like to ask something in the context of what you guys are talking about. I know that when you say you're digging into the reams of detail and data and all that kind of stuff, it's very hard to communicate that to the public at large, or basically to anybody who didn't sit at the table with you.
Yep.
Right? And it's hard to articulate from that what we're actually doing. It's like the LCAP is like 100 gazillion pages of teeny type, and it's like, okay, we're doing a lot, and that's about as comprehensive as I can be on that, or the typical person. But I think if we were able to articulate 3 to 5 overarching goals that all of that stuff rolls up to, it would help for the public to understand what our focus is. And I think that's really important. I mean, I've gotten, ever since I took this job, I've gotten, comments about our performance levels, et cetera, and we all know why those are there. We know the reasons, but I think our folks need to get a very high level sense of what it is we're actually trying to do. We're all trying to get better.
Yeah.
But like how?
Right.
Right? What are the overarching things that we're trying to do that break into those gazillion different specific tasks? And I know for me, in talking to some of these people, it would be easier to talk the 5 priorities rather than the 90 pages.
That's a great point.
I also, was surprised to hear some of the answers to questions about what are the most prominent or most important factors that give rise to success or failure. And to know that, as I think you said, that the teacher is the most important, suggests. Well, go ahead.
Absolutely the teacher, but the teacher evaluating his or her impact together with other teachers. That's the most important. I shouldn't say it's the most important, but it's the effect size is 0.93, which is a very large effect size. And so in Hattie's work, when we get around that 1.0 level, he equates that to the equivalent of 2 years of learning. So 1 year in a classroom where you have a teacher that's a primary focus of theirs, evaluating their impact on a systematic, regular basis, the achievement just flies, where a kid can, in many cases, earn 2 years of schooling time, essentially.
So that really sounds like a pedagogical idea that in teaching you should do this. This is what you should do. This is a very effective way to teach, right?
Yes.
So it's also a budget issue. I mean, right, you look at maybe we take something from here and make those more development days, those more
time to get together. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny because you can be very cynical about those development days.
Yeah, especially if they're not used properly, and maybe they haven't been completely, right? I think that's part of what we're talking about. Have we been really using those days for things that really matter, really are going to end up creating an effect that where we see a true improvement in achievement? So that's what we're looking at.
And it sounds like up to a point, they might even be more valuable than educational days.
Yeah.
When the students are there.
Potentially. I'm not
Wouldn't
advocating
spend
for
the
less
whole
educational
year
days.
doing that, right.
Or
Right,
the little breakout, the pull-out groups, the
Right.
PI groups and those kind of things.
right, there's some indication that that has much less effect.
Yeah, I was
Right.
really surprised at that. I would have thought that would have been the kind of stuff that was super important.
The TED Talk by John Hattie is only about 16 minutes, and
Didn't
it's
you
so.
send it to us?
Did I? I definitely will.
You
I
s-
think you
sent
sent
that-
us.
Well, you sent that one about quilting. But I don't remember.
Well, that had like a 1.6 effect size. No, I'm just kidding.
So this is the superintendent's report.
Sorry.
Let's
That
go
was it?
back. Okay.
So can I don't know where to put this, if this is new business or not, but circle back on a couple of things to ask you about. One of which was birth certificates. Did that ever get resolved? Did we have, we talked about giving back the birth certificates that we hold on campus
Mhm.
or,
So this is
shredding
items
them?
for future agendas.
Okay.
So which,
It kind of
We are
is
up
like
to.
old business. Like, did we finish this?
I will check in. I think the last outstanding issue was whether or not the actual software company that
Got you.
oversees the grading book and our whole Q is the system, whether or not they've made the change. I apologize. I have not followed up with them, so I will.
But I thought there was also the tangible birth certificates we were holding on campus, and we didn't want to destroy them all in case families needed them.
Yeah, because some families were.
Right, so we
using
made
us as a
available
filing cabinet.
them
Did
to be
that
picked
happen?
up. I know at some sites, I'll see
Okay,
how much
so I
is
don't remember
remaining and
ever
where.
Getting a notice saying, what do you want us to do with yours?
Okay.
And the other thing, I guess I'll wait until items for future agenda.
no, that's where we are.
Okay. Was, I had sent an email to you about the possibility of using Nordhoff's showers
Mhm.
at, first thing in the morning by families or students who don't have the ability to access one otherwise. We have families in our district who are living in trailers, living in motorhomes, and are not able to access showers on a regular basis. And there's a new program called Laundry Love that runs once a month that you can go and get your laundry done and paid for. And some families who have been coming there have been asking, where can we get showers? And there's right now only St. Andrews does showers on Saturdays in a mobile, basically in a motorhome, and it's not terribly family friendly. So the question is, especially for a high school kid that can be a really big barrier to an education. And is there something we can do? So I'll put that
I'll
out
follow
there.
up with you.
Okay.
I think it's a great thing, because I know we do have a couple of homeless families in.
Well, and it came to mind again, that's why I brought it up again, was I can't remember where in this packet I saw it, but talking about Matilaha showers, renovating I thought, does anybody even use Matilaha showers? Where did I see that?
So currently, the Matilaha showers are, we need to abate and remediate a potential health hazard. Not currently, but potential.
Okay,
So the work there is because there
It's
is,
because there's
there is mold that's not airborne and not, it is contained, but it is a concern.
and so the purpose, I guess, part of that, I should have asked it back then, was what are we doing with the showers at Matilaha? Are we required to have them? If we're renovating them, are we gonna use them, or are we renovating them just to, again, have them sit there?
Jem, the 2 years you were there, did you ever see anybody use a shower at Matilaha?
They're not
Not in the
functioning.
way it was intended.
Don't try to get
The apple does not fall far.
Look at that. No, it's a
I
good
think
point
you'd be
though, because
perfect for this seat over here.
there are a lot of, not a lot, but there are a number of facilities where the homeless can be fed and where they can spend the night, but not a lot for showers.
And I know that's not, really the school district's purpose, but when it impacts a student's ability to get an education, I think
It's our business.
that is part of our job, so.
Yeah, and the only thing that came to mind on that subject for me was the potential stigma of taking advantage of such a thing. So then I wonder if it could be done in conjunction with sort of an open gym or something where, you know, it's not like I'm showing up here to take a
Right.
shower, you know?
Right, and so some of those logistics would have
Yeah.
to be figured out, and I think, you know, we'd have to have staff there, and we'd have to find
Yeah.
a way to pay for that, and perhaps there's grants through Rotary or somebody else that can.
I wanna know what our potential liability is too. for
Yeah, well, I was
insurance
thinking, you know,
perspective.
I live across the street from Sarzati Park, and those bathrooms are open at 7 a.m. You know, it'd be interesting to see during all the rec department renovations that are supposedly gonna be happening there, and
Will they
if
put
they
showers
could,
in?
they could put a shower in each.
I think it's really important to talk with people who work with homeless families doing this in other places, because I think Jim actually made a good point, you know, are they gonna be used appropriately? And that's, I mean, I know there's a need, I would wanna fulfill that need, but we don't want it to be abused either.
No, I agree.
Right, cause then you have to have someone monitoring it or opening it.
There's a lot of logistics that would have to be figured out.
It's worth discussing.
But that said, I do think that, you know, this is part of a broader idea that the school district is part of the community, and I think anything we can do as a school district, whether it's be more integrated with the rec department or anything else that speaks to the needs of the community, I think is always good. I mean, I think it invests this community in our schools, and even those who don't necessarily have a kid in the schools or have some immediate reason for caring about the schools.
Yeah, I think it's worth discussing. There are vulnerabilities that we would wanna talk about. Because I don't, you know, whenever you bring strangers on campus,
Well, and I'm,
there are control issues, there are monitor issues, there are liability issues. Not to mention traffic issues, depending on if they're there when a class is there. But, you know, if we're looking on a weekend, for instance.
well, I wasn't really advocating necessarily for strangers on campus, but more the students that we're serving.
Well, our own students, I think,
Yeah.
I'm 100% for that. Because I think anything that enhances their education is our business.
And when I did a little bit of digging on this topic, I found that Doss Williams put through a bill that passed that doesn't necessarily fit us, but I'm putting it out there anyway, that community colleges open their showers to students of the campus who aren't necessarily involved in their sports or athletics or PE classes, that the showers are open to any student. So kind of piggybacks on that.
I think that
Well, you've got 0 period, maybe it becomes a, you know, if there are family, I mean, does the district know when families are homeless?
Yeah, yeah, we,
I mean, so maybe it could be, hey, during 0 period, you're allowed to come in.
Do we have a serial period anymore?
I think we do, don't we?
yeah, we do. We have at least, I believe, welding
I
is
think there's a-
offered.
there
I mean,
a
certainly I hear the bell every morning at,
Okay.
I was just gonna
6:40,
say, when I
6:45.
met with the junior high kids, one of them was saying that she comes early, and I said, why? And she goes, my brother goes to 0 period. I
yeah,
have to sit
we
here."
only offer a couple classes, but
Yeah.
2 or 3.
Okay. So,
Okay.
anyway.
The other thing I wanted to ask, if anyone, we did have someone, I think it was Bill Miley maybe at the last meeting, oh no, it was the other gentleman.
Mike Haley.
Do we as a board wish to discuss the effects of short-term rentals and pass some kind of a general
Send a letter.
supportive letter? Or do we just wanna,
to what?
This
The
They're
county.
already
County.
banned, to the county.
To the county.
It's a little too complicated for me to wanna weigh in on it because of what, there are a lot of, I mean, it's just, what short-term rentals would we be supporting or opposing? Would it be hosted ones or non-hosted ones, or all of the above, or?
right? So,
Well,
I'm
but
not
we-
asking for the discussion.
Right, but
Just-
as to the agenda item, I would like to have that agenda item. I mean, and when we have the agenda item, you'll hear which we're gonna ban, and you're gonna find out, my
Shelley?
friend. There you go.
I would agree that it's
Michael?
should be discussed.
Oh, I think we should talk about it, yeah.
Okay, well, there we
I'm
go.
never
Future
opposed to
agenda
talking
item,
about
SCR.
anything.
It'll be December.
So I'll add one more thing to the agenda item that came from the consent.
We're
I'm
not there
sorry.
yet, we're
No,
future.
I know, future discussions though.
Okay.
And it came from the consent agenda. The $1,500 on canine detection services. And I'm curious if that has been used recently and what the results were of that, and if that's the best way we can be using that money, if that's an effective tool still. 'Cause
So
it-
you're assuming that was a search for drugs somewhere?
That's my
And that's what
assumption.
it is.
It is, yeah.
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 It
that's my
jumped out at
assumption.
me as well, cause I didn't know we were doing that anymore. so.
Yes, and my understanding was that it's like kids know it, they don't know when it's gonna happen, but they know we occasionally do it and that it's helpful because of
Well,
that.
and I have heard from kids that we haven't hit the technology age, we're behind the curve still. And so yes, they know it's coming and it happens, but then they know it's coming and waves of texts go out. And it's a hurry up and consume right now so that nobody gets caught. And
Where do we-
meet at this location to, that kind of thing is happening. And so I wonder if that's really effective, Are we not catching anybody because it's not there, or because we are so behind the times? I'm just, it's a question. I don't have the answer, but it is a question that I have.
Do we have a protocol for that?
What do you mean protocol?
For SNAP inspections or locker inspections or?
So it's either 5 or 6 times a year they go out. We do not have the ability to mandate. Jim, don't hear this.
Well, then you can watch it on TV.
We can't mandate students actually leave their backpacks, but what we'll do is the dogs come in, students are asked to leave. I think Becky will say something to the effect of, you may leave your backpacks if you wish, which they may take them as well. And then the dog will go in and will be there for a minute and then go on to the next classroom. And so I know that Dave Munson in his former role as AP and Becky both feel pretty strongly that it is an effective deterrent. Now, I haven't checked with them to see how often it actually catches something, what they believe, and I think, Shelley, you're probably spot on as well, as far as it's not the only tool to be utilizing, if to be utilized at all, but there still are kids who are able to get around it. But I believe that Munson in his 4 years as AP of Discipline would definitely say strongly that it was, in effect, the fact that students knew it could be coming was an effective deterrent, and having things remain in the car or just be taken care of off campus. And as much as we want to discourage activity of any kind, what we have most control over is what's happening at campus. And I know that Dave and Jim feel pretty strongly that I don't know, they would be aware of instances where there is mass consumption
I've
around
talked to
that
Dave
day.
about it, and I told
Really?
him
Yeah.
about
And
it.
can
so-
dogs smell prescription drugs, or are they just marijuana and?
I don't know.
I believe so, but
And is it
any of us
$1,500
would
each
smell
time or
marijuana.
for the year?
No, that's
You
for the
would
year.
need a dog
That's for the
for
year. That's the PO being set for them.
And do they go through the parking lot or just the classrooms?
They can't,
They can't do parking
I
lots or lockers?
don't think they can do cars. Is that,
I will get more information on this item, and I understand it's been brought up as a future agenda item. I'll send out to you guys just the information about it, and then based on that, in our agenda prep meeting, we'll talk about whether or not to actually have it as a agenda item or if the information itself was sufficient. But
right?
Interestingly, our mock trial is dealing with the search and seizure limitations of the Constitution, and so this would be a perfect
yeah, there you go.
additional.
If we only had a
The issue
student
in
rep.
the issue in mock trial is the ability of your cell phone to show where you've been, and whether the prosecutor can subpoena the information from your cell provider without getting a warrant.
Oof. All right. I need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Well, I just want to point out before we do that on page 2 of 8, there's the third reference.
In the consent calendar,
Yeah.
2 of 8?
Yeah,
Okay,
2 of
I see
8.
it, yep.
The third reference is to a check 4484 from Kevin Ruff for late fees. Apparently, my wife wrote this. This was not actually my check. They must have taken the name from it, but I do not remember, or to my knowledge, I've never incurred late fees from this district. I just want to be on the record on that.
But you're not retracting payment.
Thanks for like bringing it to everyone's attention.
I just saw it. I was like, what? I don't remember this, Jim.
Just trying to do better in the future.
That's good. Denial is a good policy.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. This meeting is adjourned.